Welcome back to the Imperial 80s. I'm Tume. How are you doing?
Good, live from the Imperial 2026. That's the only way
So
you could
bad.
think about it. So bad. Yeah. Yeah. But watching this movie, I mean, we'll get to it when we get right to it. I'm just saying watching this movie though is definitely one of those reminders of like the long road we are to where we are right now. It's kind of like, damn. Wow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would. So this was the first time I've ever seen this movie, like for sure.
Oh
I didn't really realize
wow.
that. Like I wasn't sure because a lot of movies I have seen and I just don't like, you know, can't place the name and and I've seen a lot of Lou Gossett movies and all of this, so I kind of was like, oh, I probably have seen this. But I watched it this weekend and definitely had not seen it before. So we'll get into that in a minute. Sina Rahmani made hopefully will join us. He's literally up on his roof trying to get his in his rural abode in northern Canada somewhere trying to get his internet to work. So but the Iranians may have taken out his Starlink. So we'll see. Um, they took it down in their country at least, which is a good move.
Hmm.
So, let's see. So let's do a few minutes before we get into the war or into the movie, into
Yeah.
the war, um, and just talk about some updates and things that we're seeing going on, things that we want to talk about with regards to the ongoing imperialism happening as we speak in Iran. And also like some really impressive defense. I mean, it's like I don't want to like I don't know. I'm not a fetishist for militarism or anything like that, but like the you can see the necessity of it and
Hmm.
the I don't it's things are not looking good for the United States in this war right now, which is like knock on wood, like excellent news for the world at this point. So, but in the meantime, there's freaking oil rain, coming down in
Hmm.
Tehran. And somebody mentioned all of the folks who got Gulf War syndrome in the Gulf War and the first Gulf War, the George H.W. Bush one. Um, and that was from oil fields, like you know the all the crap that's in it being basically evaporated into the atmosphere.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you're talking about a city with 10 million people in Tehran. So the kind of ecological effects, as well as like to talk about LA Cadre, this the accumulation of waste and the way that wars like this just reduce life expectancy. I mean, it's very stark in terms of the forces right now that are fighting in defense of humanity in the region, fighting to remove US empire's infrastructure from the region, um, fighting to weaken Zionist imperialism, and the forces that are like just I mean the United States at this point can't even present like a coherent rationale for this war. Like, like one person's like, oh well, we're just going to take all their oil. Now you're getting this language of unconditional surrender. Trump wanted to pick the new supreme leader. Like, you're getting all of these things. And of course, the Supreme Council chose Ali Khamenei's son to be supreme leader, which was like, uh, for sure not what the United States wanted. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot that we could talk about. Gas is about to get really, it's already going way up.
Yeah.
It's about to get really fucking expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about with the ecological issues that this attack on Iran causes. That to me spoils, amongst other things, these like quasi reasoning conversations around, well, we know that maybe Trump's timing was illegal. Maybe he should have got a greater consensus amongst the Senate and whatever, however that process works. I don't really ever pay attention to that shit, 'cause to me it's meaningless. Like I've just never really like, oh, he didn't get consensus, so I'm like, okay, cool, whatever, thank you. Anyway, but the fact that these bombs are dropping and you're creating these ecological issues that literally destroy a people, there's no way you can advocate for any kind of action. And this idea that you're going to somehow, like, the insanity also that like just destabilizing something so that a government like just falls is a tactic that anyone should actually endorse, is just absolutely nuts to me, right? Because this also shows to me like where people are situated. I remember years ago, a friend of mine, um, we were talking once, and we were having a conversation with a liberal about war, and they were being very very like idealist, and I can't remember remember of it. And my homie, he came from El Salvador. He's a great painter, great communist painter. And he looked over at me. He says, "Man," he says, "I love you too, mate, but some of your American friends here don't know a shit about fucking war, man. Like they don't know nothing." And he just couldn't talk to the person anymore. And that's the kind of the same shit, you know. And I get frustrated because I've had a few conversations with people in different kind of formations, and the reasoning levels of with this, like they don't want to go out and say it, that they think this is really what they're kind of fine with this, right? And it shows you how distant they are and how Iranian people are not real people. They're a kind of like totem they can use for whatever kind of liberal chess piece or even right wing chess piece that they have, right? Um, but to hear these kinds of things, like when you present that argument, I'm like, there's no way to me that you can justify any of this, right? And yeah, so to your point, when I see resistance to it, I go right on. I go right on. I remember um some years ago, I forgot who it was, when they said they used to root for, when they started rooting for the Vietnamese in American Vietnam movies, right? I forgot who someone had said that. It was like a really funny thing, right? They said when their politics changed, when they would watch like Apocalypse Now, or they would watch this, they'd go, yeah, right. And I'm kind of like, knowing that these films are totally truncated to demonize them, but doing a kind of like active resistance within as you watch it, just for your own psychic stability, so you don't give yourself over to like rooting for Tom Berenger or Charlie Sheen in Platoon, or cheering for Captain Kilgore in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, I was what again, this was the first time I watched this movie, and I was definitely rooting against the little shit who stole the F-16. So,
Oh god, yeah.
um,
Man, Jason Gedrick, woohoo. Sorry, 80s. What was that? What was the magazine? What was the teeny bopper magazine that everyone liked to read? Was it Teen Bop or something like that, or one of those things? Someone in the
I
chat
don't
might
even
know.
remember.
What are those like little heartthrob magazines? Because Jason Gedrick was definitely one of those people who was all over them. Teen Beat,
Yeah,
Tiger Beat, I don't know, like whatever that stuff was. I didn't read it, so you know. I don't know. I just
I
saw
don't,
like
I don't, I don't know.
Tiger
Tiger
Beat.
Beat?
Yes. Yeah, I remember Tiger. That's a name I remember. And I remember because Jizza dropped it in his the follow-up to Labels, when he did the
Oh my god.
magazines publicity.
Yeah. It's wow.
Yeah.
I guess it's still in there. Like it may still be
Yeah.
around. I
It
see more
probably
recent ones.
is. Tiger
I don't
Beat,
remember
yeah.
this.
But that's the Jason Gedrick level. Yeah. But yeah. But also I wanted to shout out Jay. Like Jay, I thought your stream, I got through most of it. I didn't get to the questions. I thought your stream yesterday about good old Vic Mensa. And I didn't realize he had linked you. I saw I saw that clip and I don't really need to go into it. I have my massive challenges to Vic Mensa as a figure. I've been wanting to write this piece called "Who Picks Up Mensa's Orange Peels?" Like, because like there's to me like a metaphor in there. Jason Gedrick, yeah,
Teen Beat,
come
you were
on,
right. There is a Tiger Beat too, but
the Teen
that's
Beat,
Teen Beat.
Tiger Beat, they had all of them, right? Yeah, but yeah, to that Vic Mensa, but then also to the campism point, because I that's something, and I've dealt with it less from the we were talking before we were recording. I've dealt with it less personally from conversation with anarchists and more from the Western Marxist,
Yep.
Trotskyist, even like the or I mean, I guess there's also that crossover, the kind of liberal, the what do they call them, liberal socialists or whatever that Mac McManus and people like that call that now, the kind of Jacobin crowd that they have, that the liberal socialism is what they call it, right, or something like that. And I've dealt with that in conversations, both online and in small discussions that I don't really have anymore. And the campism kind of phrase has been lodged at me, like literally. I mean, I've seen it at
Hmm.
people like from like I don't want to even bring up the writer's name, but there was a piece about Lacerdo that kind of threw him as a campist. It's been thrown around, and then at me it's been directly, that's been something that's used. And I tell people, like, I say exactly what you say. I'm like, campism is not a thing. I don't understand. I need you to actually explain to me what campism is, and then I get into these. I know what it is
It's
in their
not a
perspectives.
but it's not an analysis, right?
No,
Like
it's not.
like you can't just like I mean, I so on one level I get it in terms of like if your argument is sort of, that their argument seems to be that there's a problem with segmenting the world into US and Western imperialism bad, everything else good. And that's not the analysis of anyone who is opposing US imperialism. Like, I mean, and maybe it is for like a few like people, maybe it is for some people, and I'm not saying that that's wrong necessarily either. But like I read out in that piece, or that that long tweet from I apologize again, I still don't know how to pronounce his name. I need to go
Yeah,
like
right
do my research
on
on
that
that.
piece though.
But
It's great.
um Powell of Oregon, like it's just the it's a way of analyzing the dynamics of imperialism in the current conjuncture, right? And you know, I just it's also like having clarity again. Like it reminds me of Arlene Eisen in the conversation we had yesterday with her and Nora. She's just like when you I was talking with her about when do splits, start to happen or things start to go awry within, the movement, because she writes in her book about her own experiences in Prairie Fire and with like May
Mhm.
19th, and when like things started to like, split up and stuff like that. Um and she says one of the really important things is that you have to keep your sight on who the enemy is, and she talks about in that era they had an objective basis for confusion around that, because the Soviet Union and China in particular called the Soviet Union the enemy, said that they were a greater enemy than US imperialism at one point.
Mhm.
um and like wherever however people felt about that split or where they landed on that, like, that was certainly wrong. Um, and I think that and it led to people then having she said, that split reflected within our movements because people took a side on it, right? And I mean, on that level, like that could be thought of as a form of campism, right? That
Mhm.
is maybe unhealthy, right? Of like, okay, we're going to, in a time when there are socialist powers and there's a capitalist power, we're going to take the side of one of the socialist powers against the other socialist power and we're not worry about the United States so much, because that is a failure to recognize what actually is the primary contradiction or the primary enemy. Um, and I think that there's something within this campism argument that definitely does fail to do that, because part of their
Mhm.
argument becomes, well, states do bad things and and you can have regional what they might call imperialism, I would call sub-imperialism, but that it whatever, like these, and so they can say, okay, well, where I sit, the primary enemy is this, right? Or whatever. And I just think that that's the problem. Like, and it's
Yeah.
not to say that the people one of the things I saw within that thread is like you're speaking over people within their conditions that have analyzed it and recognize their problems and so on and so forth. And like what I would say to that is that it's kind of this question of things being phenomenal, right? Like so you can recognize wherever you are. It's not that I'm not saying your leaders are good, right? This is part of what Powell says in that piece is like it's not
Mhm.
saying um that every leader in the global south is good and that there's not kleptocracy and corruption and um I mean I know people within Iran, there's class society in Iran, like there are there's struggles, like there was Helia Dotagi wrote that piece for Progressive International about fights for wages and stuff like that. But one of the interesting things that she points out in that piece, right, is that there are movements within Iran, and you could say the same thing for some place like Venezuela, right,
Mhm.
where or China, right, where there are movements around wages, benefits, um, so they're dealing with addressing or struggling to address the needs of the masses or the working class within their context, but they're not seeking the overthrow of their government by an imperial power, right? And they actually, in the case of that labor movement in Iran, like put out a statement to that effect, right? Of like, don't try to co-opt our movement or use it for your propaganda, right, against our state, And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing is it's like it's not that there aren't going to be struggles around wages, social issues, culture, like all of the racism, et cetera, right? There are nationalities within these places often that are struggling for, you know, whether it's representation or autonomy or things like that. But once you allow your movements to be you know, infiltrated, co-opted, used as propaganda, and you don't make that, very clear, like, then you become a part of a process of destabilization. And we were talking about this beforehand too. And at that point, like this again, to bring in Kadri, like the effect of the destabilization. I mean, and this is a point that gets brought up too, and I've listened to it in the past to a certain degree, right? Of this question of, okay, well, like, okay, Tanky, like, how do you have a revolution in another country, right? If but the point is this, like, a real revolution is not about like just your country being bombed to shit and all of your government being like obliterated and you having no national defense and no energy sovereignty and no food sovereignty, right? Like that's you have to have the masses on your side. And this is why we're very fucking far from it in the United States too. So I'm not sitting here saying it from a standpoint of like, me telling other people how to do this or how to it's not easy, right? But like it is to make the point that sure, like other countries within the world can have revolutions to bring about something better, but that's not going to look like a bunch of fucking F-15s and F-16s like flying over and missiles coming in from Israel and like, you know, I mean, Syria is like the kind of prime example right now of what that process looks like. And, you know, hundreds of thousands of people dead, right? Like so much displacement, and no national defense at this point, no real sovereignty, no real ability to take a position, at least in the immediate term, right? That would be antagonistic to the United States and Israel, um, and actually, very likely will be used as military forces against either Hezbollah or Iran, right? And so, like, um, you just all of that goes away, so it's like it's wanting a shortcut of a process, and that shortcut is just death, destruction, mayhem, right? And I think that that's the thing. It's not about saying that people can't like resist or struggle or I mean there's a huge uprising. People aren't it's not being circulated on social media that much right now. But Bahrain, right, which yes, Iran has attacked the US military infrastructure within Bahrain, but what is the result of what's happening there? So they attacked this US base, which the US base is very clearly an imperial imposition in the region by a group that has no business being there, no organic, presence in the region. And taking out that base has led the people of Bahrain to rise up and say, yeah, like get these Americans out of here. And we want a new government that doesn't invite them back in, basically. Right. And like that's a very different set of dynamics. You look at Iran right now, like the streets, they are full of people who are pro-government, who are cheering on the selection of the new supreme leader, right? Who are chanting, in the face of bombs being rained down. Like it's just like people just have too simplistic. And Cena, I wish Cena was here. Maybe he'll join us in a second. He did say that he's not able to get his internet up and going well. But um he shared this. I think it was Kai Pritzker who put it out. This video of him interviewing Iranian diaspora folks who are pro
Yeah, I saw it.
regime change. Yeah. And it's great. I mean, it's great in the same way that, like, when Abby Martin did her thing and like interviewed a bunch of Zionists in Israel, right? And they were all, she was like, "Do you really mean like death to all Arabs?" And they're like, "Yeah, kill their kids." Like they say all this stuff. It was a similar thing where you had these Iranian diaspora folks who are at these rallies that are pro US. And, you know, he's asking them, "So are you okay with the killing of 150 schoolgirls in Iran?" And they're like, "Yeah, like kill, like do it, whatever you need to do to overthrow." And it's just like that tells you so much. Like your response to that is not even like, no, that's terrible. Like it shouldn't have happened. But no, it's just like straight up like, yeah, that price to pay is fine. Like, and I mean, it just tells you a whole lot about who those people are and what their relationship actually is and how, again, we were talking about this. I don't know if we talked about it before or after we got on the air, but the kind of distance. No, you were talking about it. Yeah, I mean, like, and people within the empire, and that includes people within the empire that like may have family or be from some of these places, right? We see the same thing with like Venezuela, or Cuba, where you have people who have, your grandfather was there or your parents were there, or maybe in some cases you were there but you left, many years ago, and you have a very antagonistic relationship to the ruling government, and it becomes like this very like um I don't know. I mean, it's awful, honestly.
Well, to this point, and shout out to Jared Ball for putting up a I don't know, maybe I think he talked about it. He didn't put up the interview. There's an interview with Jon Stewart, our favorite liberal, um, and Jafar Panahi. And many art cinema people will know who Panahi is. He's been a figure in the filmmaking world for about 20 years. Um, well, no, I mean we would have to get into his films a little bit, only in a commentary. But there's an interview with him with Stewart that came out, I would say maybe a day or two after this attack by the U.S. and Israel. It's within a few days, let's just say. And the interview, because Panahi has been nominated for an Oscar again, and he's lived off a big narrative. And I'm not saying that. Well, no. Here's what I'm actually gonna situate it. He has a particular um, position of himself that he utilizes as a kind of selling point for his movies. Um, I can't confirm or, because all the sources that you hear about his situation come from either himself. I've never really gotten a really kind of defined thing on like his situation. So like people will say, "Wait, this has happened to him, this has happened to him." And I'm like, sure. And he's made films that are like in response to it. But the same token, he still is now running around Western cinema, which is totally tied to monopoly capital and fucking the biggest pieces of capital. And he's with Jon Stewart talking about that he can't speak, but then he's speaking these exact things he can't be speaking. And my biggest thing with the interview was that Panahi did not once mention, and neither did Stewart, the current attack on Iran by the US and Israel. It was not brought up once. And it went into this kind of just anti-authoritarian talk, basically doing a kind of like Trump thing that America has kind of lost its liberal democracy, and Panahi does a kind of like warning, like I live in authoritarianism. America, don't become that. So basically, don't become like Iran. It becomes this very like ugly cycle, and it all benefits Panahi. That's one of my biggest criticisms of him. Is that look, if there's any conversation about his situation or situations amongst people, we could have it, but we need to have it within a conjunctural uh, context of global imperialism and how it works and all this type of things. And he refuses it and goes to places where he knows that will not be pressed, where he can kind of make himself and this kind of bastion of freedom. And the West likes it because it basically keeps Western hegemony, because his films are about appealing to westernized thoughts of the kind of backwardness of the places that he's from and that are kind of in the kind of surrounding. So I say all this to say, to kind of connect it to you, right? Like, I'm not saying Panahi is advocating for the bombs, though he didn't say he isn't. He hasn't said anything really. In a way, I think no speaking in the situation is speaking, but we'll get into that another time, right? Or I'll let people debate that. But to this point about like diaspora and like what Kay Prickster put up, shout out to him. Like, it's true. Like, there are people who, that shows you the class society that existed in Iran before 79, right? Or the type of class society. Not saying they've overcome it, but that shows you what the Shah had and the different.
What's different too, like
yeah,
the
right.
class society before the revolution is different than
That's what I mean. Yeah,
like
they haven't overcome a class society, but it's fundamentally a different class society. And who was in power, and those people who are in power, right, who are now, maybe they were either direct people, descendants of those people, and or people who were more sympathetic to that. They're like, look, we want that power back. And like, look, and that's the thing. So I say all this to say, lastly, is that like when you hear these things, like we'll listen to Iranians, or listen to Venezuelans, or listen to Cubans, and I'm like, who? Which ones? And that's what I always ask people, which ones? And then I'll give them something. Like I sent something to a person that I was talking to from a few Iranian scholars, and they were like, I think I even sent this one from from like Sina and people like that, and they were like, oh well, those people. I was like, oh, so they're the wrong Iranians. Got it. We're clear. We can end this conversation right now. And the last thing I want to say, and I want to just so I don't forget this, on the campism thing, the last thing I would like to say on that is one of the most interesting things that I think that exists with that is, especially from the Western Marxist left, is they still live in this fantasy that the US is on this kind of moral trajectory of like enlightenment, and that revolution has to happen within the US and Western context to liberate the rest of the world. And it is one of the most Eurocentric, Europeanist positions I've ever seen. And it's absolutely rancid. And I call it out every time I see it. And it's funny because most of them, they either then, double down on like the campism, where they try to call me like some kind of postmodernist, like race thinker or something like that. Or they get like, no, 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 that's not what we're saying. And da 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 da. And it's just supremacist. It is supremacist. And it gets really fucking pernicious when it's Western Marxists who ain't white. I'm gonna do that thing like I kind of expect it from a white. If I hear a white person saying a Europeanist thing, I go, okay, that's sad. I'm glad I have my white friends who ain't like that. But that's sad. But when I see like, a brown person, I'm like, oh man, like I just go. I mean, there's one big creator and I've talked about, I don't want to say his name. Sudeep is in the chat. Sudeep knows who I'm talking about. It's one big creator who's like this, and I had to call him out. I was like, wow, bro, Risa Fanon, get your shit together. Like, this is bad, But, anyway, I wanted to leave it at that.
That's hilarious. That's so funny. Yeah, and I mean, to the supremacist thing, and I'm so far from being an expert on Iranian society and all of that, but like um the monarchists, right, like have a very supremacist view, right? So they're part of the reason why they are okay with, the bombing of, schoolgirls, right? Or the killing of, you know, thousands of Shia Muslims, et cetera, right? Is that actually even on like a racial level, they don't think of themselves as part of the same race of people, and there's actually, yeah, I mean, I need to get some more folks on to have these discussions, and in part, it's my fault because one of the things I do with this podcast, just to be clear for people who wonder, is I schedule a lot of stuff out like weeks in advance. And so when something, happens like a major war like this, which I didn't, I should have expected. Yeah, hence they say Persia and not Iran, right? That it's like, it's hard sometimes to get things shifted around to clear up schedule space as quickly as I want to. And so I think on Wednesday we'll have another discussion more deeply on Iran. But there's a lot to get into there. And I guess what I'd say, maybe unless there's anything else that you want to say before we move into the movie, is to pivot to it. Like, part of it is that it's all the ways that even among the left that we are ingrained to see, and this is like Orientalism 101 and all of that, right? But like, we're ingrained to see people from this part of the world as like very monolithic, right? As like automatons led by some, you know, dictator that just tells everybody like you do that, right? And like this movie Iron Eagle is, like I said, I hadn't seen it before, but it is like super emblematic of that. And actually, it'd be interesting, and I'd be interested in folks in the chat. You and I have been talking about this a little bit, trying to like even kind of locate like when does this really start to become a Hollywood thing? Not to say that it's not, it obviously exists within literature going much further back, and obviously within like British literature, and that's what like Said's project is, to kind of look at these people who are Orientalists, meaning they studied the Orient, right? Um, but within the within US film, it's kind of interesting to talk about or to look at like where does this come from? And there are some things you can point to for sure before the 80s, but part of it is that there's a lot going on in the 80s, that kind of, the Iranian Revolution happens in 79. That becomes something that, obviously becomes reflected in the film. Um, Delta Force comes out a little bit after this film. So it's just for people to kind of situate this film. Um, this film comes out like 6 months before Top Gun, which is different, and we can talk about that. But it's funny because this film was often, people kind of have a memory of this as sort of a Top Gun knockoff, but actually it came out first. Um, and there's some really interesting differences that have to do with the fact that it was not supported by the Pentagon, and the reasons why for that, and that it is an Israeli film essentially. Like everything is Israeli in this movie. Um, but there's also, of course, Lebanon, which this film is literally filmed by the Israeli Air Force during, war, during strikes, against Lebanon and like this. So we'll get into some of that. But this was just stuff I was reading about and watching some stuff about this film. So this is for the 80s, at least. Again, folks in the chat, if you have thoughts, but this was one of the earliest ones that we could think of that really relates to, the buildup of this kind of current moment within film, within Hollywood productions and so on. Although this is really not a Hollywood production. Um, and so my early memory of this film is that I didn't have one. Like, so I didn't watch it. And I don't know that I ever watched any of them. Maybe a little bit of them, but I,
Did you
I didn't
know
watch.
about it?
Yeah, I was aware of it, but it wasn't. And it's interesting because I mean, granted, I was like 5 when it came out, but like, you know, that doesn't matter because I was very aware of Top Gun. I was like Tom Cruise for Halloween one year, like with the fucking aviator like jacket and shades on and shit. Um, and so the type of propaganda that this film trafficked in definitely was something that would have resonated for me. I just don't know why. Like, it wasn't something that my friends were like talking about or watching that much or discussing that much. And I'm not sure, you know, if maybe that's just because Jason Gedrick was not ultimately a very big star, or, because I feel like if this had had like Stallone or Cruz or somebody like I absolutely would have ended up, you know, coming across it
Well,
ultimately.
maybe it's more understandable about why it was such a big thing in my house. Because Iron Eagle in my home was like a staple picture. Top Gun wasn't. I tell people I actually didn't fully watch Top Gun until like the 90s. And
Oh
like
wow.
Top Gun is like Top Gun for me just like doesn't I like have like a reaction to it. Like and it wasn't even the imperialism. At first it was just like the white maleness of it just doesn't work for me. I just can't take the white dudeness of it. Like that early outset, just like for me, for that kind of vibe started off. That scene where they sing to her in the fucking bar, I was like, fuck this movie. Anyway, but this movie, Iron Eagle, because of Luke Gossett Jr. And Lou Gossett Jr. for Black people in the 80s is like major. Even before, for even like my parents' generation, because to kind of situate Lou Gossett, you have to go all the way back. He's attached to so much. He's attached to A Raisin in the Sun, being on Broadway, right? He's a bit of a pillar, and not long before Iron Eagle, we can talk about it a little bit. He won the Academy Award for An Officer and a Gentleman, which I wonder if we should do. I haven't
We
seen it in
should.
years. We should.
We
I haven't
should.
seen it in a really long time, but I feel like we have to.
Yeah.
Um,
That was a
but he
staple in my house.
it was see my dad had a thing about the movie he didn't want to watch. I don't know what I think maybe I don't think my dad liked Richard Gere. I think he had a thing with Richard Gere and it just really bothered the shit out of him, so he wouldn't watch it. But Iron Eagle, he loved it. And it was all in my house constantly. I ate it up. I had this I think I had a kind of like little kid fascination towards fighter jets, right? I was really into the kind of idea of like the speed and planes. It was really, really attractive to me. And I do think whatever deprogramming I had to do around the Arab, right, in movies, and I put that in quotations really, really, really pointedly, I think came from this movie. You know, there are like key lines in this movie that I forgot existed. You know, like shitty states. I mean, like I'm actually saying quotations, right? That I'm sure were kind of like implanted in my brain, and like I loved it when I was a kid. And then I think I didn't see it for a long time, because then when you become a teenager, these kind of movies aren't like really interesting to you anymore. And then I think I saw it again maybe in like the late 90s, and I was like horrified when I went through my kind of like political awakening in like college, or like around college, and like I'm like visiting the things that I ingested, and I was horrified. But this is the first time I probably have definitely seen it in over 25 years. And what's weird about it is how much I actually remember of it, and it shows to me like how much I actually watched it as a kid. But I will also say, I think, and I'd be curious to Black folk in the chat. I feel like Black folk just watched this movie and it was marketed to us heavily because of Lou Gossett. So, like, I feel like because Lou Gossett was such a figure, it get marketed heavily towards us. It was on cable heavily. This and the sequel too. I remember I watched the sequel a lot too, which is another strange movie. Very strange if you look at the plot line. I mean, they're all strange, but like the kind of patriot games that exist within it are just really fucking like fascinating, like their brain. So yeah, it was attached to me in all these kinds of ways. And people are bringing up Enemy Mine in the chat. Probably should do that as well. But I'll lastly say, and we'll get into it, I think, as we get into the movie, I think there also became an attractiveness because Lou Gossett's performance in this, it's like, it's the fucked up thing about representation and the need for positive characters that I think movies like this become shoehorned into kind of like popular culture as like necessities, and they utilize it in this movie very, very deliberately. Especially one key scene in a dinner during dinner that I totally fucking forgot existed in the movie.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, so I really can't say like why, you know, why I didn't see it. Like it might have been that like in that era I didn't have cable, so a lot of like I didn't have cable until like early 90s ish. And so well, I had satellite at that point, but when I was this age, it would have had to have been on network TV, right, for me to have seen it, and it probably wasn't initially. I mean, it's an interesting film because it's not. It's like I think they said $10 million budget and then $26 million box office, and then another like 11 in like video rental sales and all of that kind of stuff. And so
And
it's
I'm
a
sure it had a
successful
big cable
film.
deal. And I'm sure it had a big cable deal that will not, like, we probably couldn't find the
Yeah,
numbers of, but I feel like it had a big cable deal.
yeah. So successful, right? But like very much, it does become very eclipsed by Top Gun in terms of like blockbuster, which becomes the biggest selling movie of the same year. But other things too, like, this is like 4 years after GI Joe animated series like starts to kind of take off. So like there was a lot of, I mean, I know we've talked about this to some degree, but there was a lot. You talked about the fighter jet thing for kids. Like there was a ton of that kind of propaganda to us growing up in the 80s. Like I actually think that, I mean, the equivalent today is Marvel movies, but it's interesting in that respect because although I think Marvel movies are all about, pushing DOD and like, um, you know, militarism and US imperialism, like it is a little bit more subdued because it's like a kind of fictional world and you have these like, you know, these other entities, whether it's Shield or the Avengers or, and so it's kind of a little bit, I mean, you have to actually move a little bit to a kind of reading of the film rather than it just being like, hey, like these we're gonna get in a bunch of F-16s, right? And like go fly around and like this is look how awesome this is, right? Which was really the way it was in the 80s. It was like we're not gonna put any fucking pretenses to this shit. Like we're just doing a commercial for imperialism. Um and the other film that is very connected to this film for me rewatching it is Karate Kid because like the which also came out just for context for folks like 2 years before this and was a huge hit. Um, but both, Jason Gedrick's character as like very much kind of a Ralph Macchio type, and he has like the whole fights with bullies and like all of this kind of stuff, which is also a very 80s theme of the like the bully that you have to you have to defeat. Um and That and then Lou Gossett Jr. is Miyagi. Like he is absolutely the Miyagi character, right? You know. And this is also, I mean, it makes me think back to our conversation with Samantha too about Empire Strikes Back. It's also the Yoda, right? Like and so um it's interesting that particular device within its 80s, character device of having this older, wiser, hardened, a little bit authoritarian, you know, but also like paternalistic in certain ways
But it's good for
and
you. But it's good
supportive,
for
right?
you.
Like to bring out your inner like imperialists, bring out your hero for empire, right? And yeah, so anyway, that's interesting. But what do we want to start with?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things to kind of frame the movie. Like, to your point, I think the teen movie we have to really begin to bring in. Like the 80s really begins to invest in the teen movie. Um, I think by like the mid 80s, right? And one of the kind of things with the teen movie is to then have like the teen movie version of a particular type of thing, which is what people thought they called Iron Eagle Teen Gun, right? I think when they said it was a knockoff, but it came before. But I think you could think more of it as we want to make something about teens that could like be kind of connected with military, right? Because military movies are a thing, right? And the idea of military making the man, um, and the idea of the military community too. I think there's like ideas of like familial communities because when the movie starts and we'll get into it, it's very clear that they want to show this kind of like stabilized American family, solid values. Yes, there's a couple of like, characters who are miscreants, but they are the rarity, and in a way you can use them as like a juxtaposition piece with like the degenerate state in the Middle East, because there is no country named that they're fighting. You can kind of like show like how they deal with the miscreants domestically and internationally, right? um so it's like really like an interesting thing, I think, for the kind of like American movie like psyche. And yet, to your point on the Karate Kid thing, I mean, they went so far as to literally grabbing one of the Karate Kid villain henchmen in the movie for a small part. It's the body bag kid. Yeah, with a body bag. Yeah. He's in the movie and he literally does one of the like criminal acts of taking, the cap out of the plane, right? And then also you have the guy who plays Styles in Teen Wolf in it. So you also get the friends. We can get into that when we kind of get into like the coordination. But to a couple of people who help like make the movie, I think is important to kind of throw them in here. So, and then we could talk about this. So it's written by a guy named Kevin Allen Elders, right? Pretty unremarkable, you know, screenwriter, right? Sold a lot of screenplays, so forth and so on. And he says he based the film off of what you would find on the internet as called the Gulf of Sidra incident, right? And we can get into that in a second, probably about what that is in the context, right? And I say that because like even studying it, you're getting the story straight from the kind of like American news perspective. So even I find calling it the Gulf of Sidra incident, this kind of like detached from the kind of imperialist games from the US towards global South nations. I even hate kind of like having to use that as like the fucking framing for it, but it's based on that. So he wrote this script, sold it to Hollywood, and it's directed by a guy named Sidney J. Fury, who's a huge journeyman director, like unremarkable movies. Like if you look through his listing, he worked in Canada, he worked in the UK, and here in the US. He was about in his 50s when he made this movie. He has a very unremarkable career. In a way, the Iron Eagle's like his big thing, right? There's some other things in there, but like it's pretty unremarkable, right? Um, you were shaking your head. Is there something else in there?
There's a couple of things that are interesting.
Like
So
what?
just quickly. So one, Lonesome Dove, which
He
was
did
like
do after.
huge.
He did that after. Yeah.
Yeah, after. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the
Mm-hmm.
interesting stuff is after. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's really not when I go before.
He did do Lady
Um,
Sings the Blues. That was the other big thing, which I think is very interesting. He directed Lady Sings the Blues, and I forgot about that one. I did write that one down.
yeah. So yeah,
Which
I mean,
which
it's
people
not
which people don't know, that is the Motown made film about Billie Holiday, starring Diana Ross.
interesting. Yeah, no, he directed a lot of crap for
Yeah,
sure. But
yeah.
and not his next movie after this is Superman 4, which I think at some point we do have to do the
The
80s
Quest
Superman
for
movies.
Peace. And the Quest for Peace is a fucking what radioactive man or whatever he was called.
Nuclear Man. Nuclear
Nuclear
Man, yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Um yeah, so anyways, I mean he is like a very much a journeyman,
hmm
nothing in here is like, I mean, Lonesome Dove is probably the best thing that he's involved in any
My father was a
sense, and
huge Lonesome
my dad
Dove
too.
guy. Oh my
My dad too.
gosh. He just lost his
Yeah.
mind over that.
Yeah. So anyways, and it's not 80, so we won't do it cuz it's
Yeah.
94, but
Yeah.
anyway.
But yeah, but like a long journeyman career. He did that, and the script was like this way. It's the same story. The script was turned down by many people, and all of this, and then it was picked up um by an independent producer, and it was and again in Ron Samuels, and they went into kind of pre-production. Now, I'm sure Jay might have more into this. So at the time, the United States Air Force, um, they had a policy where they would not participate in films where things like theft of aircraft, which is a huge plot in the film, is depicted. So they could not get authorization from the Air Force. There's a I'm sure Jay has more on this. There's also a lot of stuff, and if you look at it, like some of like Alfred and Seckler's work, they talk about this. There was a particular position between military on the kinds of films that they would greenlight. So things like theft or certain type of quote unquote malfeasance that they would see that could happen within the ranks of any of the bodies of military, they wouldn't support that. Even if the film was like super imperialist, they were like, we don't want to have these kinds of things happening, right? So instead of that, and I did not know this until we started researching this movie, right? They turned to the Israeli Air Force for all the necessary aerial sequences. They were 6 weeks in Israel shooting the film. Um, Jay is gonna bring in. I didn't realize it was happening to it because all I saw when I read it is it was that they were shooting around the time, and I always love how they write these things out. Israel had to do military operations, right? But I was like, okay, what the fuck were those operations, right? All of those shots you would see are happening, but as Jay has alluded to, there was particular operations happening at the time that they actually did shoot it. But yeah, all of the military stuff is given by that, right? They did shoot some of it in California, but for what I read, majority of that was some of the base stuff because the way the bases in Israel look different than in California where they shot, right? So they wanted to get that, and then of course, like the community, the home community, they wanted to kind of have a particular kind of look that was, well, I guess America. Though I wonder some of those things. I wondered if they were also shot over there. Like I'm like that's interesting. I don't know. I could see the desert, in California kind of being a thing, but I was like I don't know. That's interesting. But yeah, like so there is that kind of big collaboration. I don't know, Jay, if you want to add anything into those points before we move on.
Yeah. Um, so, I mean, part of the lore around this movie is that it supposedly almost caused an international diplomatic incident because they were shooting it on an Israeli Air Force base during a time when Israel was flying raids over Lebanon. And so this is so there's some funny things around this, not like interesting things around this, I guess, kind of funny in some respect. So they're funny in the respect that they reveal the linkages between Zionism and US imperialism and so on. So they are real F-16s. The F-16s were originally supposed to be sold to Iran, but then the Iranian Revolution happens and they won't sell them to the new Iranian leadership. I mean, obviously there's the whole, fallout. The Shah goes to the United States. People in the US embassy are taken to try to negotiate the return of the Shah, which, again, Arlene Eisen reminded us of that yesterday because she was protesting for the return of the Shah. And the Shah was to be returned to face punishment, just to be clear, by the revolutionary leadership. And um so they didn't sell those F-16s to Iran. They sold them to Israel. Israel used them. So the planes that are used had actually had combat experience. They had been used to bomb Iraq. They had been used to bomb Lebanon by the Israeli Air Force. So of course, to film this, they have to repaint them as US to make them look like US F-16s. Not to change anything about them, but to paint them differently so that they look like US F-16s. So during and I didn't dig deeply into the context of this, but something happens and Israel decides that they need these jets to go fly missions, and they start flying them and then realize that they're still painted with American colors as they're flying over Lebanon. Now, like, I mean, on some level, you know, like today, would that even matter? Would anybody even give a shit? Because obviously they're so integrated at this point that, no. But in the 80s, and this is part of the critique that's embedded within this movie, Reagan is not going hard at at Lebanon or at Iran, right? Even though he ran in many ways on Carter's softness, Carter allowing US people to be, kidnapped by Iran and all of this whole Iran Contra incident and all that. But most of Reagan's foreign policy was directed, as we've talked about with Stephen Osuna, Alex Savinia, and others, at Central America, right? And there is there's the incident that goes on in Beirut, right? There's all this stuff, and amid all of that, the US does support certain things, of course, that Israel is doing and all of this, but also wants a little bit of distance a lot of times and does not want to directly engage. So, anyways, the point being that what was for a while, I guess, classified, that eventually became released related to this film, was that this almost caused international diplomatic incident. And also, it's important that it's in the context of the Cold War as well, right? So, like, the United States, and so a lot of the Arab countries or whatever had support from the Soviet Union to a certain degree in this period as well. And so it like wouldn't have just necessarily been that they were, violating Lebanese airspace or something like that, right? But it could trigger a broader conflict. Um, and so that's part of the lore here that's fascinating. The one other thing I will add on this, so they had to bring the planes back, repaint them with Israeli colors, like fly the missions. Allegedly, this is what happened, and then, um, and so there is a whole thing about shooting being shut down for a day and a half, so that the equipment could be used in the war or whatever. Um, so there's that. The other thing that's interesting is that they talk in the film about MiGs, right, which would be Soviet planes, and you couldn't get real Soviet planes for Hollywood movies in the 80s. And maybe if you could, I don't know, because we'll have to talk about that when we get into Top Gun, because I think in Top Gun there are MiGs are also part of Top Gun. But
I mean, the MiG becomes, or with these movies, it becomes like literally a particular character in war movies. Yeah.
for sure, for sure. But anyways, MiGs are Soviet, right? And so they couldn't get them for sure. So what they did is, and I'll have to look up the Israeli planes, but they repaint some Israeli made jets that don't look anything like what a MiG looks like. And their bet is just that, like, Americans are too dumb and won't be able to tell the difference and won't know, which of course we are. And so anyways, it's there every plane in this movie is Israeli. It's just that some of them are F-16s that they purchased because the US obviously sells F-16s to Israel all the time. Um, and some of them are their like shitty little homemade, jets or whatever, and they paint them a little bit different and call them MiGs. But I'll look up what type it is. But anyways, all of that I found pretty funny.
Well, no, the design, I just literally looked at it. Like the MiG design is like this kind of like triangle heavily in this movie. And it's funny, I just Googled the MiG design for Top Gun, and they just painted black, right? It's like just a black painted plane. I mean, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. Yeah. Ah, man. Yeah, a couple of other things to kind of, like, begin to situate in the movie. Um,
So they're called Al Kafir, like
these are the planes?
Kfir, Kafir. Yeah.
Mhm.
And F-21s. Let me see if I can
Okay,
find a picture.
okay.
Um, yeah, and they're supposed to be MiG-28s. So, anyways, I'll just show these real quick. You can
They
talk
look
while I'm doing this,
Yeah,
but
they look
yeah.
nothing like a Big 28. I mean, like, I just Googled it and you're like, no, they're nowhere near it. And like, it's so funny because this is where the propaganda works. Like, it literally, when I think of a MiG, this movie's MiG literally sticks in my brain, right? It sticks in my memory of like what that plane looks like, right? It's really, really, really fascinating. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Um, so I guess a last couple of things to kind of get to before we like as we or we can start maybe getting right into the movie is Lou Gossett, and I want to read Lou Gossett Jr.'s quote about why he did the movie. And I thought this was really kind of telling. He said he accepted the part because it offered a positive relationship between blacks and whites, with race not being an issue or even ever mentioned, which is a lie because it is mentioned in the key scene. This is a lie, first off. But I think to situate the kind of ideology of this movie and kind of how it sits, I think that's like really important because you, yep,
This is an actual
the
MiG,
actual,
just for
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Looks
yeah,
nothing like that.
and it's funny if you see the movie, like I can't like they kind of like triangle it out more. It effectively making it look like a toy plane, which I think is really important in this movie, right? The idea that they're just flying toys and they don't really have like great military might. They're just like authoritarian and degenerate. But yeah, so Gossett doing the movie from this, I think, is really important to kind of know. And like Gossett's career, you could kind of go through it. He's from Brooklyn, raised in New York, got into theater pretty early. He is in a really significant play that I've never liked called Take a Giant Step. Um, that's like one of his first big things on Broadway. I have major issues with that play, but we can talk. But it actually kind of fits in the kind of like conservative mind state, right? He's also famously in A Raisin in the Sun in Broadway, and I think also in the film. I can't remember. I can't remember if he's in the film or not. I think he is. At least the filmed version, right? Has this long career that goes through Broadway for years, begins to transition into TV, so forth and so on. And then, Roots is like his big thing in the late 70s, right? And people remember that. He wins an Emmy for that, right? Where he win? I think he wins the Emmy for that. And a couple of years later, An Officer and a Gentleman, he wins the Oscar. And this is like beginning one of these things about where like black people winning Oscars is so rare. I mean, at that point, I think at that point you had only one best. Was he the first to win Best Supporting Actor? I think he might have been the first to win Best Supporting Actor. He might have been because
Yeah.
Denzel wins it
He
after him. I think he is. I think Lou
Sidney
Gossett is this.
Poitier never.
He won Best Actor,
Mhm. And I know
right?
that supporting actress,
Actress. You
right,
had Hattie. Yeah,
is
Hattie.
Hattie Mc yeah.
Yeah. So I think he's the
So I
first
don't
one
know,
Best
might have been.
Supporting Actor, right? And then Denzel wins it a few years after for Glory, which we have to do. So it becomes like this big moment. But one of the kind of conversations around Lou Gossett, and I don't do this as an apologia for him at all, is that he gets an Oscar and he's doing Firestarter, Walker, or whatever with fucking Chuck Norris for Canon, right? He's doing Jaws 3D. Like he doesn't get a kind of like entree into becoming a great, leading man like white people do, which I don't love getting kind of stuck in those conversations. So sometimes used as an apologia of why he would do something like an Iron Eagle. I don't buy that as an apologia, as a legitimate defense of why he would do something. He believed in this movie, right? And yeah, so he kind of is in this movie, and we could talk a little bit about Goss's later life. Is we don't have to, but he collaborated with Republican regimes. He becomes a kind of military kind of like figure doing this movie, like endorsed by it. He did shit with Reagan. Him and RFK Jr. had a relationship. Or, like it's pretty wild. But I want to kind of get to the movie. So yeah, so the movie, the way it starts, you get right into the kind of plane action, right? You kind of open up the movie, you're like riding with the planes, and it's funny because like I even as a kid, like I remember it as a kid, like I got immediately kind of transported back. I was like, yeah, I would have found this exciting, seeing these two big ass planes in the sky and da 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 da. And I'm like, oh, this is cool, planes. But also like you can see how cheap it is. Like the actual title card of Iron Eagle is like the cheapest type. It's like, yeah, we spent all this money on planes. We gotta use a cheap ass type. Like it's so cheap, right? Like it's kind of hilarious to me. But you're getting the kind of like the planes are coming through, and then immediately, and this is I think very interesting to talk about it like politically, you get these so you have two American or US, also US F-16s flying, right? They're doing like a routine like kind of fly around. And then you get these, and you get like the kind of like radar thing with like, you go to the controls, and then you get the kind of like four MiGs come into their view, right? And the MiGs demand that or remind them that they are in, or tell them that they are in they're in this Middle Eastern nation's airspace. And this is where I'm tripping up because it's purposeful. There's no nation ever named in this
They give
entire
it
film.
don't they give
They
it a
do?
name, but it's fake.
I don't remember it. Maybe because it's fake. I don't
Yeah.
remember it. They don't invoke it often, right?
No.
They always say this state, and it's not like they do it at all because they're very pointed at some point. We'll talk about and bringing in Iran. They say Iran in the film very, very clearly, all right, to invoke a kind of memory. But like you come in and basically they're like, you're in our airspace, right? And they're like, what are you talking about? This is bullshit. Da-da-da. No, we're not. We're fine, right? And then immediately the first people to fire the missiles, and it pretty much within like seconds of like communication, it is this, hostile force from the Middle East, right? And they fire missiles, and there's like this dogfight that kind of happens where um, Colonel Masters, which we'll get to, who he is in a second, is able to take out one, or take out a couple, and then one of the others leaves to kind of get back to base, right? And they're in it, but of course he eventually gets shot down, right? And this, I said, like, is supposed to be inspired by an event that happened, I believe it was 81. The Gulf of Sidra, what they call the Gulf of Sidra incident, right? And it has to do with Libya, right? And I might, if anyone knows more about it, please help me here. The claim from the U.S. side of it is that there was a agreed upon airspace kind of thing, or via international law. And I put those in quotations because this is really what it's kind of about, and what the movie kind of tries to honestly like piss upon any kind of challenge of what international law actually is as a construction of imperial power, right? Even me saying that, I become a caricature in this movie. Right? Even me saying that, are you just one of them? But the whole idea is that the U.S. says there's an international law made thing, right? And it's this amount of space, and the people of Libya at that time were like, no, that's our space, right? And there's an incident that turns into a dogfight where people are shot down, right? And but like nothing like this movie. This movie has like shot down, trials, all types of shit. Nothing like this movie. It's an incident. Go ahead.
You mean a teenager didn't steal an F-16 and go
No,
save his father?
no,
Like,
there wasn't a trial that happened in 24 hours that sentences him to death, and all this shit, right? It's like all this stuff that gets added to the movie. No, it's literally an incident of I mean, really, what is it about? It has to do with the development of imperial nation states, them carving out what they dictate to be land that they can kind of be over, nations pushing back and saying, no, I'm sorry. International law doesn't count because, like, who has the international power? You do. So, and the film really is made in a large way to basically delegitimize any kind of argument towards sovereign nations having any kind of say in dictating what the not even dictating, saying what the United States and other imperial powers can do. It's an illegitimate argument in this movie. If anything, it's a degenerate argument, and it's a backwards argument.
yeah, I mean, when they shot down his dad, I was like, good job. Like, he shouldn't have been flying so close to your land. Like, I mean, nobody else. This is the thing, is it's like, Libya is not flying jets like, 15 miles off of the United States. Like, China and Russia are not doing that, or in this period, the Soviet Union, right? Like, who does that? The United States. The United States thinks it could fly fucking military jets right along the border, or put a fucking, base right outside your country or on your land, right? Like, it becomes such a ridiculous thing. And for them to invoke international law on this, oh, does the United States care about international law? Gee, I must have missed the fucking memo. Like, come on. Like, so yeah, like, shoot down those jets. I mean, like, it's just, anyway, but yeah, you're right. And I think the way I am reading it is basically that, you know, the United States claims that it can fly X number of, miles outside of a country's board, where it's like land meets the water, right? Basically, it's airspace. And they claim that this has a basis in international law. And I had to say, like, I think at some point they show a map of it's Bilia is the name of the country, or billion, or Biliad, but it's made up, right? And I think it's an interesting conversation, but I think they did this like more in the 80s, like is also done in GI Joe, of create these fictional, like, Arab countries or desert countries that have like Arab peoples or things like this in it. Um and I think it's particularly a Cold War kind of context, because they're like not necessarily wanting to piss off like some specific country in this era where the world is divided up into these blocks. And, in theory, the United States might want to appeal to some of these countries to come to their side, and so on and so forth. Um, so they create a fictional country, but it feels very much like Libya as you're watching it. So it didn't surprise me that that's, or feels very much like, the imagination of Libya that we're supposed to have, I should say. It doesn't surprise me that it would be based upon an incident that happened that way. And yeah, I mean, so Libya had said in this period, like, look, like, if you come within this number of miles from our border, like, we will engage you, and we don't care that international law, quote unquote, says you can fly within 10 miles or whatever.
So to add, what the U.S. was using was a thing called the Freedom of Navigation Agreement or Act or something like that, right? Meaning that there should be this freedom of navigation. But, like, I
Yeah,
think
you're
if
not
anyone
navigating.
agrees to that,
This is not a like a boat,
yeah,
or like,
it's military. It's military, right? And they said in the 70s, Libya was like, look, you're sending military in our horizon. This is hostile. And And then Reagan, which becomes a really big person, even invoked in the film, he intensified it the minute he became president, right? So then within a year of him becoming president, this happens. Because it's like you don't listen to him for like 7-8 years, and then when a new president comes in, you intensify it.
He sent 2 aircraft carriers, like not
Yes,
just like it's
aircraft
not just like a
carrier.
couple of like it's not a couple of F-16s, right? That are just like flying on their way from like one place to another, right? He put 2 aircraft carriers into the disputed zone, quote unquote disputed. Yeah, no.
I mean, it's wild. And like it's wild. And like learning about this and like watching the movie, I'm just like, oh wow. I mean, it's like reading one of those New York Times articles, like or like New York Post articles that you read about this shit. It's like this is that kind of movie. They're gonna leave all of that shit out. Right. So planes get shot down and you get it, and the music the music is like this really like synthesizing kind of trying to be American. My lady was like, what is this music? She was like, because she didn't watch the movie with me, she was like walking behind me, she was like, the fuck is this music, man? And I was like, yeah, it's bullshit, right? Kind of trying to sound militarist, but we'll get into the music of the movie later. And then you get plopped right into military base life. And I find this really interesting. And this is where I feel like the kind of like army recruitment thing kind of comes in with the movie, because you get your star played by Jason Gedrick. This is like I think it might be his first leading role. I think he's in another film, but I've never seen it. I don't know if it was a lead role, but this is like kind of like a launch pad to make Jason Gedrick like a big movie star. As they're vying to make more teen people, and you see him, and he has his little tape deck, which we'll get into, like his little tape deck, and he's fixing it, right? And not to get into all the scenes, I think maybe we could talk about this film a bit like generally, because like it's a really boring movie in many ways, but we kind of talk about it in like the big like tense. It's like very like normal. They want a normalcy of like American kind of family life. Like he's a teenager, he's focused, he has all of his like Air Force stuff, he has his little like bomber coat, that he's able to rock, and has like the music. You immediately hear that he's graduating from high school, and he's getting ready for the prom. Like they're invoking all of the kind of American things. He has like a little brother who's a bit of a shit, but he loves him. And the brother's calling an older girl, right? And then his little sister's complaining about her dress, and the mom is very dutiful, and it's all very sappy. But the other thing that kind of situate him is he's a bit of a rebel. So he has a Mustang, right? Drops in his Mustang, right? Puts his tape recorder on, and he's driving around the kind of the base, and speeding past cars, causing many possible accidents, right? He has like a rebellious streak, but they attach it to a kind of like family dutifulness. So they're kind of forgiving it, right? This kind of like hot rod, hot edge kind of guy, but they don't want to go in that like direction of, say, someone like who's the villain in Karate Kid, like
Oh,
like Johnny, right?
Johnny
We're
Lawrence,
like
yeah.
Johnny, where Johnny's like a real shit, like he's a bully. Like this guy isn't a bully; he's just a bit of a hot rod and a bit of a rebel. He's a rebel with a good heart, right? And he immediately, and then he gets to the gas station when we can head here, and he has his little friends crew. And this is where we just gotta like start to get into like certain 80s tropes, because he has his 2 male friends, one of them played by a brother named people will remember from certain movies. um is it Larry B. Scott? Is it him? I think it is him. um I can't remember
Yep,
if it was him or
Larry B.
not.
Scott is
Larry,
Reggie.
yeah,
Yeah.
Reggie, yeah, Larry B. Scott. People have seen him in movies. He's the black friend. He's immediately breakdancing upon when they see him. Yes, exactly. I'm not lying. He drives in, and the black man is breakdancing, right? Right.
He's Lamar in Revenge of the Nerds 1 and 2,
Yep.
which we'll have to do at some point
Yeah,
too. And
and the Lamar character, whew,
Base Camp,
is
Karate Kid.
Space Camp. He's in a lot of these movies, and like the Lamar character, when we get to that, is a real just piece of work of a character. In so many ways, anti-gay, anti-black. It's just bad on every level. But yeah, like, so he has this kind of like cast of friends and like the kind of crew. So they really want to like situate it in this like American fantasia on the military base. And you can't watch this and not see this as like the kind of like high precipice of like American ideals, all focused and connected to with shots of military. Like you see planes happening, you hear them, you see military officers around everything that they're doing. They invoke military. Like the military is seen really from the beginning, the American military, especially after you juxtapose it with what previously happened, as like the good guys and like salt of the earth kind of energy. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird movie. I mean, and so they're the Eagles Flying Club. I mean, it is very like it is such a like I just wonder in the 80s were they like running on a pilot shortage? Like were they like we need to make movies to like get people interested in flying F-16s or
Well, no, we didn't bring this up. I mean, this you also have to put, well, and it probably would have come up. There is the context of Vietnam because Vietnam within this film
sure.
is invoked so heavily. So, to your point, Jay, I do wonder if there was general recruitment issues in that kind of,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know.
I think there probably were, but one of the things I do wonder about too is that like it just particular to Navy pilots and Air Force pilots, if this was like a particular area that they were struggling in some ways and were worried, like it feels like there's an imperial anxiety going on in this era of like if we want to be able to defend this empire, we need more fucking F-16 pilots because you get this movie and then you get Top Gun right after it. And yeah, I don't know. It's just an interesting that could be totally BS, but it'd be interesting if
No,
anybody
but think
dug into
about
it
it. Like, think about the previous decade and images of boots on the ground in Vietnam
for sure.
and how horrific that is. You know, the idea of boots in the ground. Look, there are other ways to be an imperialist military person. You could hop in a plane and drop bombs from the sky.
Well, this is what Pete Hegseth is saying right now is like witness the raw power of American air power or whatever, the devastation, like um so yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
The other thing just about the scene, yeah, I mean it's weird. Like, do they say where they are ever?
No, I
Like,
looked that up too.
yeah.
I immediately guessed it was in California, but I did not ever get a place. And I looked, but they don't. They're really big in this movie and not mentioning places. Um, and I
Well,
think
because they're in Israel. Or they're in occupied
right,
Palestine, I should say.
right, exactly.
Um
Occupy Palestine, exactly. Right. No, but
uh
I think it's also like a bad writing device. This idea that it can be anywhere. So like the
yeah.
idea, it's all so two things. It's all American and also it's all villainous. So yeah, it is Libya, but it could be Iran, it could be Iraq. And when I was a kid, I thought Iraq.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, so it could be California. It also could be Florida. That was another thing that I was thinking about. But anyways, like generic Air Force Base, USA. Everybody's a fucking colonel in this movie, by the way. Did you notice that? Like it's like, hey colonel, hey colonel. It's like
You
how
be
many
passing
fucking
about.
colonels?
You passing about colonels, bro. Hey, colonel. You get a colonel. You get a colonel.
And I mean, it's the whole thing is funny. I mean, the idea, like, so Jason Gedrick's character, they have their own flying club. They got little Cessnas and all of this. But he also is constantly getting like Air Force people to give him time in the flight simulator, right? Like taking it away from US pilots and all of this, right? Um, and he's, of course, he's applied to the Air Force Academy
Yeah.
and doesn't get in because he flunked social studies. What did he flunk?
I forgot. I think it was like well, whatever it was, he only flunked it because he needed to get simulator time, so he cut class.
Right. Yeah, he cut school to go sit in the simulator, so he flunked some high school class and tanked his GPA. Um,
But also, like, I read that as like, no, the military doesn't do nepotism.
right,
Right, you know what I'm saying?
right.
Until the end, right? Until he can prove that he can be a really good imperialist. But the military doesn't do nepotism just because his dad is a colonel and he lives on the base. We don't just hand out jobs, right? He has to like show standards, and he did not show the standard. And I'm like, get the entire fuck out of here, man. Like, stop this bullshit, dude. Like, you're just watching it. Like, stop trying to play with me. We know how that goes, especially the son of a colonel. Come on, you know, right? And then the other thing they want to do is like the big rival. They have to do like the rivalry thing, right? Which is like, and it's so weird what the movie spends its time on. Right? It's like weird because like you have that, and then they have this big kind of like rivalry thing they want to invoke pretty early. So they're like at where all the teens hang out in like the sunny places. They're at the drive-in a burger
Yeah, like
place,
the drive-in burger place. Yep.
yeah. So it's just it's like he's like they use all the same shit. It's just so bad. So he's there. He has a girlfriend in the film who's an actress who's like on a lot of television series that I don't watch, but I know people know who she is. It's like an early version of what she does. She comes in, she's being followed by a car and a bike, and there's like this rivalry. This guy who has like a dirt bike, right? And he messes with Doug, with Gedrick's character constantly about flying this thing called the Snake, right? And it's like a kind of like death trap thing, and they want to basically fly a plane versus a bike, some kind of like supremacy thing. And I think because dirt bikes also were just really popular in kind of like lore of like young maleness, they want to show like the plane is superior type shit. So um he messes with him, basically kind of gets a rise out of him. Like the big thing that he does is he finds the crumpled up paper of Doug's rejected letter and reads it out on the loudspeaker, which then just basically invokes him to be like, I'll fly the thing with you, right? And it's kind of what I was getting to a minute ago. Like, they want to show Doug as like this person of principle. And this is kind of goes back to like the Martin Riggs thing that I talked about like a little bit late in Lethal Weapon. And it's really or even like what later happened with McLean, right? This like principled rule breaker, right? Like, yes, he can break rules. He does. He's a little bit of a shit, right? But at the core of him, he respects family. He plays by the rules when in like a real rule-based system, right? And if he breaks the rules, which this whole movie will be, it's because he has higher principle than even any parts of the government. And they need to like solidify that early, because what happens is he agrees to fly the snake, someone else got killed by it earlier, and they kind of invoke it. And your man from Karate Kid, Body Bag Kid, when they go to like do it, he'll always be in my head with a body bag. Yeah, it was always in my head. I just love that scene. It's fucking hilarious. So when he takes off the cap, right? He goes to his plane, and I guess he takes off his oil cap, meaning that I guess the oil will probably dissipate once the plane starts flying or something like that. So he is flying against an unprincipled group, And then they have this whole sequence where they like fly the snake, and it's like with the plane and the bike, and you get the black man doing the commentary and being funny. It's like the movie. It's just I'm watching it. I'm like, oh my fucking god, why did I like this? I was 5, or 6 years old. Jesus, what they could do to kids. And of course, he beats the guy, right? Nearly dies, beats the guy, but but you see, his kind of principled nature. He's extraordinary. He has like the ability to kind of get past, the this issue with like the oil tanker and things, or the oil cap and all that. And and they really have to situate that, and that becomes like the kind of like bedrock of the whole movie. Like high principle, does break rules or has his own rules, because he has to, also the other big trope is he has to do everything to like really bad 80s rock. Right? The whole
It's so
movie.
funny when you read this stuff about this by these is that like I just have to say, and I'm glad that we do this series, because as I navigate the world of like film, like YouTube, and like everybody just, it's all about loving everything. Like it's all about like, it's just about like, oh, this is a great such and such a da 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 da, and critics panned it. Leonard Maltin called it a crime against humanity, but this is a great, like it's just, you know, I don't know. But the rock music thing, like it gets, you know, it gets treated as though he's listening to like the baddest ass rocket. Like this is like a feature of the film. And somebody brought this up in one of the videos I was watching, which is really true, is that he has a specific, like, I don't remember the term that they use, but basically it's like the pilot version of a fetish. Like he cannot shoot anything unless he's listening to rock and roll. He literally he misses everything whenever he's shooting in an airplane. And Chappie is like, played by Lou Gossett Jr., is like, you gotta like, you can't have music on. Like we need to be able to communicate with each other. I don't want to hear that stupid shit you're listening to, like all this. And he can't, when he flies without rock music in his ears, he can't shoot anything. But the minute that he listens to rock and roll, he becomes fucking Hawkeye. Like he can't miss. He could shoot anything. And so, it's like, I don't even know a good metaphor to describe it.
It's the ultimate like relaxer and stimulant, like 80s rock, like, what does he say? What does he say? You'll mess up my
American
timing.
values, rock and roll.
It's so, but I think that's part of it too. Like there's this, like I feel like this, like the director of this film is like in his 50s. I don't know how old the writer was at this time, but it feels like a very nod to the youth too. Like we hear you, we know you like your rock music, and we get you, right? And it's like it's what they think about, giving, life to them is about. That's what Dreams at Night does.
Does for the whole city of Philadelphia, Manny.
Yeah. I mean, it's so irritating in the movie. Like it becomes this like really big irritant. They even have to say, "Oh, that's a good song," right? While he's playing it, and eventually he gets proven right, which is I think is the other part that like we have to. It becomes this like liberal thing of we have to embrace these things about our kids, right, and find the kind of inroad, right? Because yeah, I think at the core, what you're saying, Jay, is really correct. There is a need for a certain type of pro-imperial attitude to basically be like, look, how do we get the next generation in on this? Acknowledging, I mean, the movie has a lot of Vietnam invoking, right? And acknowledging that why people might not want to join military anymore, be a part of it, right? And not even and not definitely from a pro-imperial, an anti-imperialist perspective, but from a like kind of like well, this sucks. I don't want to die, right? Kind of perspective, or like people die, they don't want to do that.
Shout out to Dwayne Monroe. He says, "You're right. By the 1980s, there was an aging cohort of Vietnam era pilots who were aging out. The heir of arms of empire turned to Hollywood for propaganda help, as always."
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. It's clear for this movie. I mean, because the thing kind of wrapping it up is like these kids are not only like in this club, like it's their life. It's like totalizing.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Like
like what karate is to Daniel Caruso, flying, F-16s is for these little, naval, Air
and
Force
and
base kids.
military
Like
data, because of course they're gonna have their nerd, right? They gotta
a
everyone
hacker.
has the hacker, the nerd hacker with glasses who's short, right? He's tinier than all of them, right? But he is feisty and he gets it done. Because what you then have after this kind of thing is they come and they tell Doug that his dad's been shot down. And that becomes the next big part of the movie, you know.
My apologies. I was convincing. I was. Is it
David
David Caruso?
Caruso,
Yeah, I was.
the
I was.
actor,
I was mixing imperialists. My
and
bad.
NYPD Blue, and he's also in the best Abel Ferrara movie, King of New York, which we have to do. He's in that. He plays a real shithead, and Abel gives him a nice
He was in.
outing.
He was in First Blood too. Yeah.
Yes, and really interesting, weird. And then of course CSI. He begins CSI.
Yeah. And NYPD Blue. He's the
Yeah,
lead guy
NYPD
for
Blue. Yeah, and
numbers.
then he
Yeah.
left. Yeah. But yeah, so you get this, they tell Doug that his dad has been shot down, and that the nerd knows this, and gets driven by military, which is like becomes the other part of the movie, like the next part of the movie. So like, not only are these kids like fighter jet, Air Force like nerds, they also have like access to everything within the no, not just like the workings of their base, but through the workings of the base, through literally the entire military industrial complex. They
Well,
literally have access and control.
all of their fathers are colonels, right? Like every single one of them has a colonel dad somehow.
Except for
There's
the
like
brother.
there's 40.
You
Yeah,
don't
he
see the
doesn't.
brother's parent. You don't see the brother's parents.
Lou Gossett is his spiritual father.
Yeah, I'm like, how come he don't know each other? The black people, they don't know each other on this base.
Oh my god.
Movie, but yeah, you're right. I mean, all their fathers are colonels, and they know everything. So they get like, then it gets to like the next part of the movie where, um, the family gets informed. They go to like the base, and they won't give them all information, right? It's like limited information. And then he basically busts in, right, to get the information. So he busts into like, the interior rooms of the military base. And it is very funny because in the movie, what I found hilarious also is like they make all of the military people like not brutal. So like you can kind of like the cadets, or not or like the kind of like whatever they would, people who are like watching the security people, you can kind of talk them down and get by, or you could drive through something and you won't get in trouble. Maybe they're trying to make a kind of a comment on like the kind of familial nature of the military, or this base is kind of soft, but I'm kind of like shit, they'd be easy to take out, if this kind of attitude. So he goes in, right, and he wants more information, and he meets one of these like military people that he says knew his dad, or knows his dad, and like they're very close. So he kind of pressures it, you know, for more information. And this is where like the movie gets real into fucking with like the politics of it, because where they want to start situating is kind of like how you're supposed to feel about this country, and you already kind of are there, and you've already had images of the father kind of like in this like jail cell, they every time they go to this Middle East country, they put the kind of cliche Arab music of, and it's all, even the color coordination is different, and everyone looks very wicked and, or suppressed and just, evil and degenerate. So when they talk about it, they say that the father's going to be put on trial for by this Middle Eastern nation. And yeah, someone said the yellow filter. Yeah, exactly. They have the total yellow filter. It's like put it on the lens, yellow filter, And it's so fucking funny, man. And they say a couple of things: that the father's gonna be put on trial because um uh the territorial sovereignty, right? And the way the whatever this military person who Doug is talking to speaks about it, it's totally flippant. He doesn't take anything that this nation is saying like seriously, only that they'll do something by maybe to the dad, but it's actual political legitimacy, it has none. And they even say it like several times. So they go like, yeah, like they say we call them basically a pariah nation. They don't have diplomatic relations with them. They even admit to having an embargo against the nation, right? But yeah, we have an embargo against them. They're a pariah nation. I mean, the way he says it, the way he speaks about it, it's like it's just these little things, and then like they want you to like think embargoes are just like, oh, you can't send toothbrushes, right? You know what I'm saying? Like an embargo is just like, oh yeah, designer fans can't go into the country, and not that an embargo is a hostile act, right? Especially thinking about how the U.S. controls global capital, right, and all that type of shit, right? And yeah, and then even the idea of the kind of the airspace, right? He says we know it's just bullshit. He just says it, right? Like it's whatever, right? And that basically they're just acting out of a kind of like degenerate hostility, right? And and he says, or like a kind of way to kind of like show other nations that they won't bow down to the U.S., right? Is the other thing that he invokes. And then the son is kind of like, come on, man, like you got to help out my dad. And it becomes very personal. But they're very clear to show you that this state is like just batshit opportunistic and has no legitimacy in any of its arguments. And you have to think about like how that plays on the mentality even right now, right? That like you think about Iran, right? And even in conversations that I've had with people, when you begin to talk about national sovereignty, right, and how this kind of framework works, that it's never legitimate. And this kind of goes back to what I say like earlier, right? We were both saying earlier how what someone like Vic Mensa does, he does not realize how this plays into delegitimizing the national sovereignty of nations, right? He's literally doing a similar thing that this movie is doing, right? It's like because if you watched this movie and you thought this nation was real, you're like, yeah, maybe they should get bombed. It's like, yeah, maybe you should bomb them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's certainly what the movie's encouraging people to feel for sure. One note is that the guy who plays what do they even name? They must name him the leader of
No. Oh yeah, he's a
the
Brit.
country.
Well, and a Brit, and
Well,
you'll go.
yeah, so he's I mean his background, his mother um is or his father is a Lithuanian Jewish obstetrician and gynecologist, whatever. Um and then his mother is also an actress, and so he's very famous. I mean, where people would know him most prominently probably is that he plays Poirot on all of those Agatha Christie films. So anyways, I thought it was, again, it's really funny this to watch the brown face in the 80s, which constantly happens. Like we had it all over Delta Force and we talked about it,
Robert
right?
Forster was
Robert
one.
Forster.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this guy is supposed to be like, Gaddafi, Hussein, like, some like combination, right, of the Middle Eastern, Arab dictator or whatever, and it's played by this British actor with some Eastern European, heritage as well. And anyway, I just thought that was like, you know, it
I
was
always find I always find their performances because they always play them like very still, right? Right? He's always like, and I'm not gonna do the bad accent, so I'm not gonna do it. They have they have the generic accent, and they always speak in this kind of way that's very centered, right? It's like everything is a decree, and it's like, homie, this is not Richard II. Like, stop this bullshit. And but the willingness to do it's I mean, also, I do blame Shakespeare in a way, because if you think about Shakespeare and the amount of times that they allow people to play these characters who are from different nations and, brown face up or not even do it, just invoke it. It's part of the kind of the tradition. But yeah, no, yeah, that's a clear thing to say that, like, and like I think another one of the guys, he's a very small role. He's also in Delta Force. I know he's Israeli, is in the film. And yeah, I mean, it's a thing when they do these movies, they largely get white actors or Israeli actors. Um, later on, I would say it does get a bit more pernicious because then you do get some who who from the Arab, from the Arab region who want to play some of these roles, but you don't get that many. You get a lot of people who want to brown face it. It's a you know
Yeah, especially in the
little
'80s. I mean, I don't
yeah.
I don't think I mean, nowadays you can get away with people from different nationalities, like, saying
Mhm.
had like an Indian actor or something like this, like playing, but like uh going straight like white dude.
Oh, you wouldn't do that
I
no
mean,
more.
but yeah, I mean, when does Gandhi come out? Because Kingsley, played
It's
Gandhi.
80, it's around this time, and
Oh, we have to do
Kingsley,
that.
yeah, oh god, fucking that movie. I just we need to. It's just really, really, really boring.
Yeah, it's so long too.
Because he's yeah, that's what I mean. Because Kingsley's dad is Indian. Is that the not to excuse the movie in any kind of way, but that also becomes the kind of the discourse around it and why they probably feel that they could do
Yeah.
it, right?
You're right, he's
Um
mixed, so he does have some Indian
yeah,
heritage, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, the big like brown facing of these movies. So yeah, so you get the kind of thing, and then you get the kind of like the primary problem for the kid. His dad is there. They're very tepid about getting him out, right? He doesn't know. And it's also this issue that kind of comes up when we've talked about it, is like the suits are the problem. Like that our government is somewhat in this kind of bureaucratic mess. And this that they can't do what needs to be done. And this is Die Hard, this is Lethal Weapon, this is even RoboCop, this is all of them. There's like this kind of like inability to take that next step, right? And the kid is calling him out, right? And like the people of conscience, So this is where you so then the only other scene that I kind of want to bring up is the scene where he tells his friends about what's up. And this scene is deep because they mentioned two things that I found really that I did not remember, because probably when I was too young in the context. So the very first thing is the guy who's also Styles in Teen Wolf. He basically says, like, they're a shitty little nation, right? We don't take mess. We'll get your dad, so forth and so on. And Doug's response is, yeah, just like Iran, right? So he throws that in there, and I was like, "Oh!" I almost fell back. I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting." And then the next thing that happens is the Reggie, played by our brother Larry. He comes out and says, "Look, man, like I have a couple of the lines that he says here. He says, don't worry about Iran." He's like, "That was Mr. Peanut talking about Jimmy Carter, right?" Um, and that, we now have Ronnie Reagan is what they call him, which I guess was a thing to call him. I didn't know that, right? Actually, Ronnie Reagan, and he says, don't take shit from gimpy little countries. And they say this shit like unironically, dead serious. Like, I'm just like, and like, look, I'm always gonna say it, to get like a young black man to say this in a movie is like just like, oh, it's like an extra little like knife turn, especially considering, in 79 they let all the black folk go. But we don't have to get into that one. But it's part of it. It's part of it. Like they really make him say this or have him say this as a character. But that sequence to me was real deep. That in a movie that's largely a teen movie, right? That they make this really plain pro-Republican, imperialist, like hard militaristic kind of vision through the mouth of teenagers, right? They're more hardcore than the older people, than the suits.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is the swear I'm gonna sound like a tinfoil hat person, but that's okay. But like in you study like counterinsurgency field manual and stuff like this. Like there's all this discussion or this emphasis around generations. And like in a counterinsurgency context, it's talking about how to separate prior generation or like new generations from the prior if the prior is very radicalized. It's this is all liberal imperialist bullshit, but like they're saying like if you have um a society with an active insurgency, or as we would say like a revolutionary group, right, then your goal is to separate out the younger generations from that. And like we could talk about that in the United States in some respects, but like really where the imperialists try to play this out is places like Iran, is places like Cuba, is places like Venezuela. They want to convince younger people, right, that their parents had it wrong and that the problems that they are facing now are not the product of US sanctions or, imperialism. In fact, the fact that these countries invoke imperialism is just because they're despotic, right? And they want to claim that there's some other evil force out in the world to excuse their own barbarity, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So these are the kinds of messages that are delivered to younger people to try to separate them out or to convince them that the path that their parents have taken was the wrong one, which also can resonate with younger people because we sometimes like to rebel against who our parents are, et cetera, right? Um, and so that's a strategy. It's a psychological warfare strategy. But within that, like within the 80s, what's interesting is that, and it makes total sense to me, your parents were against the Vietnam War, right? These kids' parents were against the Vietnam War. Um, since then, Empire has had a difficult time, like really stepping into its role as a imperial hegemon. Yes, there have been these smaller wars and so on, but Reagan is one of the first to kind of promote that heavily, especially posts like Nixon. Um, and that's not to diminish. I mean, I know that Ford and Carter, were doing their own imperialist shit in various countries around the world, but it does pick up in the 80s. And I remember this even so I have, I've talked about this before, but I have military folks on my mother's side of the family. And I remember discourses in the 80s and 90s about like the shutting down of bases, right? The pulling back of American power and how this was all a mistake and Washington didn't get it and this and that, right? And so this very much plays into a discourse that you would have had from people who were like, we need to flex our muscles more. I mean, it is what Hegseth is all about, right? Is like Biden and Obama, like these people are holding us back. Like we need to step into the power and the might of the American military and show what we can do to cause destruction and so on. So then you have these kids in this movie who are like, we need to save, my father, right? Especially the main character, Doug, need to save my father. And it's this conservative brass that doesn't want to ruffle feathers, doesn't want to cause some kind of international incident, doesn't want to, you know, inflame the Cold War, right? And these kind of things that are holding it back. And so I mean, Steven said we could have world peace if it was not for the bureaucracy, right? Like these are the kind of things. And it's really more along the lines of we could have dominant American hegemony, right? If not for the bureaucracy. So I think it's very interesting from a kind of generational discourse of trying to convince younger generations to be more pro-imperialists than their parents, right? To be more aggressive. And it also connects in with a lot of like kind of propaganda, stuff about and cowboy films, right? The idea that these institutions, sometimes what you need is people to just sort of be break with the institutions and just go take matters into their own hands, right? And is the part that the Air Force, why they don't actually sign off, and the Pentagon doesn't sign off on this movie, because they're like, we're going to hack into the Air Force base, we're going to steal jets, and we're going to fucking fly there. Like, it's wild.
Well, there's a hilarious line that Lou Gossett says. So we'll get to like the kind of like the kid hacking in a moment, but it's like the nerd name is Milo. And there's a moment where he says, Lou Gossett, Chappie says, good thing Milo's on our side. And I'm like, oh, so you're admitting, a kind of defunct, military operation that could be easily kind of hacked into if it was, that the person had the right kind of, or the wrong kind of, moral principles, right? But yeah, no, it's totally like prevalent throughout the film that this new generation has a kind of energy, and there's a later conversation between Chappie and Doug and young Doug that I think is really that's really indicative of it. So as the film kind of continues, like they have like the show trial, right? And right, and it's also it's getting like juxtaposed with like the graduation and the prom. You see the black man do more dancing. I mean, like literally, people who have not watched this movie, man. This I'm just like, man, come on, man. Like even Lou Gossett gets to shake his butt to James Brown. I mean, it's just fucking like, gosh, Jesus. Right. Like stop. Sorry. Sorry, I don't want to offend anybody in there if you're a Christian. My bad. But anyway, it's just wild. So you get the show trial. They eventually basically say that like, oh, they found him guilty. So this leads Doug to basically saying, you know what? They're not going to help my dad. I gotta take matters into my own hands. So he tells his little brother, let's get the Eagles together and let's meet at the clubhouse. He literally says the clubhouse, which I'm kind of like, woo, the clubhouse, where the real military plans get made. And in this kind of moment where they're starting to do that, right? He's already encountered Lou Gossett Jr. Chappie earlier in the film because he fixes his plane in the snake race, but he doesn't know who he is. All right. So Doug is able to steal like flight simulator time. He goes to the flight simulator. So can I get in? The guy's like, well, the guy is not here. You can kind of go in. And he goes into the simulator and there's a guy. You begin to hear a voice, which is Lou Gossett Jr., like giving him like the instructions as he like gets like higher in the levels. He messes up, right? Doug, he gets killed in the simulator. He walks in, and who's behind it? It's Lou Gossett in his full regalia now, And he's like, oh, wait a minute. He realizes dude is a colonel. Oh, snap.
You're a colonel too. Oh, shit.
You're a colonel too. Colonel. You get a colonel. You get a colonel. I mean, the kid has 2 colonels in his life. He has 2 colonel dads. I mean, what a lucky guy, And then they begin to have this conversation, right? And in the conversation, a couple of things kind of come up. One is like the general thing about that Chappie, knows about his dad's situation and that he's sad about it, and and that he respects his dad, though you don't know why. He said he says he's one of the good people. He kind of invokes these kinds of things, and he kind of gives, and then Doug begins to kind of like get him into a conversation about, do you think they're gonna help my dad? What do you think it'll take? And he gets to kind of like peruse, Chappie's thoughts around basically could a plane go up in there, basically knock out this country and rescue my dad? Could we just do that? And Chappie's kind of like, he's not saying no, but he's saying like, calm down. And then, Doug does the thing where he says, you don't really care, man. And then Lou Gossett has to do his best black man acting. He does this thing with like the lip, the lip acting. People know what this is. Like, yeah, I done served this country. It's so fucking annoying. He does the voice too. It's like so bad. But the big thing about it is he invokes Nam, the Pacific, right? And that he did it for 22 years. He's seen bodies blown up and young people killed. And don't you ever tell him, that he doesn't care, right? But of course, this kind of like, leaves a mark on Chappie, right? You can kind of see like the internal, acting. Yes, his best black man acting. I mean, it's like that lip, like, yeah. It's like, I'm telling you, if you haven't seen the movie, try to go find that clip. Like, you just watch that. It's like the lip, it's like the upper lip doesn't move. And he just goes, and he's looking down at him. It's so fucking bad, right? Anyway, but the Vietnam thing, it gets really invoked, right? That like, kind of like, and how I took it, I'd be curious what you think, Jay. It's kind of invoked like they're kind of like scarred by it. That the older generation is like emotionally scarred, and it's maybe stunted them a little bit to like finding that old gear, which like I have to say is such a diabolical narrative. I mean, like, even if you hold it up to like the littlest of scrutiny, I mean, it's just a woo, it's really bad to use this to kind of invoke something. I mean, we all know what they do, but it's just like, well, that's really fucked up, But yeah, that's what he does to Doug, and like he doesn't agree. He tells Doug to go home and like stay with the family. But you see him like walk off to the plane. But he's a little something that Doug is kind of like, stuck on him, and so enough of the movie because you know where the movie's probably gonna end, that like this is like a very convincing argument for him.
Yeah. I don't have any anything to add or notes, really, but it is kind of the I'm trying to think actually if there's like a little bit of how, there is like if you think about what is the name of the guy that Lucas used for the Star Wars movies, the warrior or the hero, like narratively, like coming up with
Obi-Wan.
the no, 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 not actually a character, like
Oh,
an
Campbell, Joseph Campbell. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
this stuff is in there because it's like first, if you think about those movies, right? Like Luke has to also convince Yoda, right, that he's like worthy of being, trained, right? Or and I'd have to think about it. We'll do Karate Kid. We should do that soon. But I think there is a little bit, if I remember correctly, of Daniel LaRusso, sort of being like, I need you to train me kind of thing.
It's not only
Or
till he gets his ass like whipped
yeah, yeah.
after the shower thing that Miyagi chooses it to help him.
Diabolical bullies in the 80s, man. But I really want. I need some 80s. I need some Gen Xers to chime in. Like, were the bullies in the 80s just like next level? Like, was it way different than what we had in the 90s? I don't know. Um, but anyway, so the point just being that Doug has to kind of, there's this way of chipping away at the mentor figure to be like, you know, you're not living up to your values, basically, kind of thing. And it plants, it's like inception. It plants a seed in his brain that he can't quite get out, you know. So
It's
yeah,
the
I think
voice of the youth. It's the voice of the youth. You know, it's the voice of the youth. Different from the 70s when they were telling you, anti-imperialism is the way. Now they're like, be imperialist, please. Like, we're begging you, right? Drop bombs. Get back on the horse. And a last thing I'll say, and it's because it comes a kind of arc. I also do wonder about Chappie as the beginning of a long trope of black male authority figures for white people in the American project, right? This someone there was a commentary that I can't remember who had said it some years ago, and I gotta try to locate it, where they talked about like black men being principals, even black women eventually being principals of in like TV shows and things like that, these kind of authority figures, the idea of a kind of certain type of black authority as a kind of like pure authority if it's attached to a good American liberal democracy ethic, right? And in this movie, you see Chappie really invoke all of the kind of like key tropes, right? And you just see where he's situated, like constantly in the shots. I mean, he's in his regalia and like next to the planes and how he's kind of constructed. He becomes this mouthpiece, and it's like it's also deep to kind of watch a black man be the person who a is the wake up call for a kind of generation of Americans, right? And then he becomes the necessary secondary father, right, to a young white kid who needs refinement. And it's yeah, someone every show has a black head cop. You're right. That became a big thing in the 90s, like NYPD Blue, like the police captain being a black man, right? It becomes this real necessary trope that's begun. And like Chappie is like, taking parts of the Yoda, of the Mr. Miyagi, and you now have this new kind of form through military. Because yeah, this is what and then happens is that Doug has to then go into this kind of proving ground. So he gets all the Eagles together. They begin like, you get the montage of kids basically stealing information from their military dads, right? And their colonels, excuse me. And they get all this like, they collect all information from like flight plans and hack into things to get planes set up. They get all the military intelligence information, and he locates it all back to go back to Chappie eventually to be like, "Hey, Chappie, I got you all this stuff. What do I got to do to convince you to for us to go in there, basically steal a bunch of of military fighter jets and go rescue my dad?"
that's it.
That's it. And then what did he discover? That Chappie already kind of has been starting actually.
Yeah, he's like, he's got like a map laid out. It's like got the
You
whole.
know,
Oh yeah, I planned it last night. Like,
she planned it. Yeah, we are working on this. Last night when I heard they're gonna in that damn show trial. And he has
right.
this line about he has an authoritarian government kind of line. Like I get, something about, people who destroy good men just, really, just gets me angry. It's just right.
Got to get
And yeah,
past that pathetic American impotence that won't let us go save this.
and then, so he brings him all the info. He's like, all right, I'll let you come in and we can talk about it. And we're gonna listen to some black music as I do it. So you get to see Lou Gossett do his booty shake and playing military to black music. And it's just like, I'm like, man, dude. I'm just like, I just, it just gets really I'm watching it, I'm like, this is just crazy, just moving around, doing this thing, planning the stuff. He has the kid next to him. Like, I mean, it is deep. There's like a scene where he's like jogging and Doug is like reading him like, military information and all that type of stuff. And it's just like it's absurd just like to kind of like watch it. Um and then they basically all the way land to he has the plan, but he has to kind of fine tune it, and that um it can't be one jet, it'll be two of them. And that basically Chappie will go in with Doug. If Doug can prove to him that he can fly good enough, right? Which is also kind of fucking hilarious. It's like, I'm sorry, man. I don't know. Look, if there's anybody who flew an F-16 ever going to watch this, is it that easy? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Listen, he had more hours in the simulator than most of the pilots on the base. That's what he told you. Like
right,
that,
the simulator. The simulator. So,
um, yeah, and then this is where you get the scene where they go out together and they got to shoot targets, right? Doug has to shoot targets. And, I don't remember the exact thing, but Chappie's like basically like, because he connects in. And is it even like the way I was reading it was like he was playing cassettes, but those don't even look like cassettes. Was it cassettes or was it like a reel to reel, like,
I think
I
they're
don't know,
cassettes. I think it's the way
the
he
thing
had
looks?
the thing looks where you can't see the edges. Because I remember cassette things like that. At
Okay.
least I think it is. Unless it's like mini cassettes, but I don't know if they had mini cassettes back then. Or they,
I mean, it's supposed to be a cassette of some kind. Like, so
yeah.
he's somehow like figured out how to rewire the cockpit of the F-16 so that he can play his cassette player over and by the way, this is one of there are several things that like military nerds really fucking hate about this movie, and this is one of them. Like pilots are like, that's so dangerous. You can't hear, like, you wouldn't be able to hear, you connect with everything, and all this stuff. And they never do that, right? But anyway, and so Chappie basically says that, like, turn that off. Like, one, I think it's partly in a like, I don't want to listen to that crap. Like if you had James Brown on, he probably would have felt a little bit different. But um but anyway, he takes it off and they go through a run, right? And he's, by the way, like shooting missiles and bombs during this run, just wasting like, whatever, probably hundreds of thousands in this period. Nowadays it would be millions in
Yeah.
the military budget, firing off live rounds. Um and he misses all the targets. He can't hit anything. And Chappie is just basically like, this is not going to work. Now, actually, I'm going ahead a little bit, right? Because they don't do this until they get to Spain.
No, they do this. No,
Do they
you're
do it now?
right.
Okay.
They do
Okay.
it now. Yeah.
Um, and anyway, he goes on this, and he can't hit anything, and then he's like, Lou Gossett's basically like, we're gonna go back. Like, I'm not going out there with somebody who can't shoot anything. Like, this is if you can't shoot these targets, like, what are we doing? We're going home. And and then he puts on, he's like, okay, I got to put on my rock music, and he listens to, what is it? I think it's Queen
Oh, is
that
that
he's
what it is?
playing.
I actually don't know. I actually don't know these songs because also the
One,
sound mix is really bad in the movie because you can't actually hear
yeah,
the songs that well. It's really badly sound mixed.
one of the songs is Queen. I'll have to pull up the soundtrack. Actually has like a lot of 80s rock kind of stalwarts or whatever. But anyways, he go and then he can hit everything. Like, it's just like, just taking him out,
And
right? Blowing
Chappie's
stuff
like,
up.
whoa, ho, ho! He's like, you the man. Deal done. You're flying. I'm like, get the entire fuck out of here. Like, I get movie magic and like getting to the narrative really quickly, but come on, you could at least made it a couple of weeks. Like, like have like and the only way they try to solve it, I think, in the brain is that they show a previous flashback sequence earlier in the movie that Doug had flown with his dad a little bit, right? And he does like, and before, what I also hate is when before he shoots all the stuff, you want to see how I could fly? You want to see me turn? You want to see me go? And it's like, oh, being able to do a hard turn, is that really the I'm like, get the fuck out of here. That's like, like I'm showing you like my basketball moves. I'm trying to like do like hook shots from like 3-point line. It's like it's just so fucking stupid, right? Um, there is one other sequence before this that I think is really important. Is they have a dinner at a black restaurant with like, of course Chappie, he's a military man. He's very cool with the white folks, but at night he goes with the blacks. Right? At night he goes with the blacks. He's in it, got that brother slapping with a voice like this, all that type of shit. They're playing like the music, but it's Italian food, which I think is interesting. I was like, why is it not soul food? But okay, whatever. So they're at this restaurant and they're talking more about it, right, and all this shit. And Doug is like, about like why my father and all this type of stuff. And Chappie tells him the story about one day he goes to the simulator. He's not in his military stuff. He's still kind of dirty. And there's like a young white guy at the simulator, and he does, he kind of basically tells Chappie, because he doesn't know who Chappie is, that, tough nuggets, you're late. You can't get in there. But Colonel Masters comes out, he sees Chappie, gives him the salute, which then, lets the other white folks know they fucked up being racist. And this let him know that, white Masters, older white Colonel Masters, is that good kind of white, right? And I watched like, of course they have to do this. I bet Reagan loved that scene when he saw Iron Eagle, man. I bet Rubio loves this movie. He's like, yeah, I'm sure they love this shit. I actually did find a conservative website that loves Iron Eagle, partly for this reason. It was like an
Yeah.
article saying that Iron Eagle does the job, diversity amongst our military, and the advocating for the good kind of relations that we want within the military. I was like, wow, that's deep. But yeah, so you have this sequence that invokes that. So you kind of also get a kind of like higher level of his dad. And like, look, also we have to say it out loud how you're using this relationship between white and black to also pretty much delegitimize any kind of racist consideration of the Arab folks, that are totally caricatured being played by a white Brit.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really interesting things, I mean, I was saying this, I don't remember what conversation I said this recently where I was thinking about this more, of just thinking about the military as the first and most successful diversity, equity, and inclusion project within Empire. And you really think about it, and it starts like the Civil War is the real, like, post the US Civil War, the United States could not win. I mean, including the United States Civil War, I should say, which we'll get into glory eventually. Um, that the United States could not win any war without black people, right? Or any war without, you know, minorities, national, um, and that is central to American power. And so even though there's all of these horror stories for generations of black people, joining in the military and dealing with all the white racism and et cetera, right? That and then of course foundational to it in some ways, I think, is that in the Civil War, the North doesn't win the Civil War, right, without black people's involvement. And then, like, paradoxically, of course, because of that, black people don't win their freedom, nominal freedom, but freedom from slavery not nominal. I mean, freedom from slavery and into, wage slavery and, debt peonage and all the other horrible systems to reinscribe. But, um, without joining that military, right? And so there is this like long conflicted, kind of colonial relationship there in terms of the military. But that Lou Gossett line, I mean, I also think about Ori Burton talking to us about Lethal Weapon, and how bad like Danny Glover's treat character would have been treated in that generation of cops being among the first because police are integrated much later on than the US military. And of course, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's segregated units throughout multiple wars, like through World War One and all of this. So it's not as though it takes quite a while. I don't even maybe World War Two even probably some of the unit. I don't know that they had integrated units in World War Two. Probably not. Um, they didn't. Yeah.
No, they didn't. My
Um,
grandfather, yeah. No, they didn't.
Yeah, and so it's Vietnam really, and I don't know about Korea, but, like, it takes a while, before you get integration, but you still get participation, right, in segregated units and so on. Um, and so in the '80s, like, this is still very much I'm sure there's still plenty of racism within the military, but it becomes this space where this it's really a conservative kind of agenda. But yeah, this kind of like, oh well, race doesn't matter. We're all fighting for the same thing here, right? And then it becomes about, this sort of meritocracy of the military. And I mean, this is all mythological bullshit and all of that, but it becomes an important part of how the empire wants to present itself for sure, because segregation and the history of enslavement and all of this are, especially during the Cold War, very much a stain on US empire's ability to project itself internationally. Is like, well, you don't even treat black people like full citizens really in your country, right? So
Yeah, that's important. Even when you think about Chappie in this film, when he invokes Vietnam, you also get that he's always been in a position of high leadership. So even in Vietnam, they kind of invoke that, especially when we'll get to like his Book of Dead Kids moment in a moment, right? Um, and but also, and then now that he's in this leadership, he's a colonel, and this is where the kind of the singular representational, kind of figure. I mean, this also really like you have to think about how think about Colin Powell and how many like liberal Democrat black people I knew, my father included, who were willing to really enter the space when Colin Powell was thinking about running for president and throwing their support around him, totally discounting his long imperialist record. I mean, long to Vietnam, war crimes, literal war crimes he is a part of, right? And I think about a character like Chappie, how you see someone like Colin Powell when he was being kind of, put out there, and how this kind of like helped that, right?
yeah, I mean, even in my family growing up, and my parents, as I've talked about before, were I mean, my father was a conscientious objector, right? And all of this. And like, I felt had a strong anti-imperialist analysis for a certain part. It, but not without holes. And I don't know that they ever would have voted. I don't think they ever would have voted for Colin Powell. But the idea of Colin Powell as a political figure to them still had some like appeal, and maybe it was sort of in the lens of like, well, it would be good if he was running as a Republican, right? Because, that's not like wouldn't vote for him, but if he won, then it wouldn't be as, this kind of thinking. But like, the it's I think it's hard to describe in this era that we're in now, like post Obama and post like Lloyd Austin and all of these other people, I mean, obviously there's still a cachet that these figures have among liberals like crazy. But in that time period, I think like the one black representation seemed so impossible on some level. But two, um, there was something weird that went on with people's brains around Colin Powell, and not just black people, like white people too, right? Of like, well, he'd be a black president, kind of thing, that sort of uh, rhetoric. And yeah, it is. Angela Davis in her book on abolition democracy actually does talk, and it's a shame because I don't agree with like her overall politics around electoralism and Democratic Party and all of that stuff. I think it's lame and frankly garbage. But the she makes a point in that book that the diversification was first a conservative project, like that actually you get it in Republican administrations before you get it in Democratic administrations. And then if you look at, like, for instance, I mean, this is later on, but the George W. Bush administration, it's it's a rainbow coalition of neoconservatives, right? Like you have Condoleezza Rice, you have Colin Powell in there, you have Alberto Gonzalez, right? Like, and so there's a whole bunch of black people and people of color in key positions, um and that comes before you get to Obama. So in many ways, like, Obama is actually a product, I think, of a lot of the kind of greasing of the skids of that W. Bush administration.
Yeah, I mean, even Andy Young, like all these people who are doing stuff, like Jared Baldwin talking a lot about that. This this work within the government, and then you get so you get these figures, these characters, like a Chappie, like a Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon, and then you get in the '90s. I mean, we could get into it when Denzel starts playing these characters in a lot of these movies. What's the one? Crimson Tide. All these movies when his military man, which is he's done more. He's played more military. If you add military people and cops to
And
Denzel's
CIA too.
and CIA. Yeah, military, CIA, anything to do with the state. That's like I think as someone says like 70% of his movies, which is just and then like 20% is that like something like criminals like like Training Day. He wasn't a criminal, he was a cop, but actually but stuff like that is what I mean. But yeah, like 70 like 3/4 of his movies are that in some kind of way. So
Yeah.
to continue with like the film, like so they go into like the long planning. The Eagles are planning with, they do a lot of these like corny montages, trying to make jokes. You get a white dude, you get Jason Gedrick gets to do his black slappy impersonation and all that type of shit, and it's annoying. And they're kind of planning everything, getting everything going. No one's the wiser. They're able to kind of slip through everything. He gives these yeah, I mean, for me, it's just wild to see this black man, giving these like young white kids props. It's like it's like it's just such a weird kind of mental thing to watch, right? It's like this like it's another thing. It was an analysis I once made of, and I don't want to get too much into it because we should do it, of Conan, of of James Earl Jones's character, and because it also plays into a kind of functionary of non-white peoples being of the old world. So there's a kind of like old world, kind of like original. In a way, they kind of acknowledge like an original people kind of way. So they kind of get to, bastion upon the newer people, the more enlightened next group. That you are good. So he gets to be kind of the father, the kind of like old father thing. It's really explicit in the Conan movie, but we can talk about that another time. Um, but yeah, so they basically get to like, the eve of them, going out. And, he's like, go to sleep, young Doug. We got a long thing to do, right? Yeah, right. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm ready to go. and he needs to get into the uncle moment and let him know that he's not ready. So he grabs this book, right? And it's a book, and they're looking, and it's like a pictures of like young men, you know, in military times, all hugging, and like you get like I guess it's like I don't know what it is. It's like little like military things, like pins of them, and like they're like collected in the book, right? And the big narrative from young Doug is that he's ready, he's not scared, he's ready to do it, he's got it, he's got it. And Chappie wants to invoke to him that who was also ready? All these young men, but they're dead. They're dead. Right? It's just like he has to let them know that. And really invoke to him like the seriousness of what they're about to get into right now, right? And they have this like really deep conversation about death and the consequences and the risk, and that Doug needs to take it seriously, know that he's going to do it. But also Chappie gets to be the kind of embodiment of the American guilt of the lost youth of the Vietnam generation, right? Which kind of like goes back to Rambo a little bit, right? When we talked about, when really that whole movie, the first Rambo, but kind of invoking that thing and like the kind of guilt. But you also get to see Chappie like basically like the thing is like the guilt gets to get exercised through Doug. Like Doug's success will actually I guess exercise it. And I'd be curious if you agree with this, Jay. Almost like make it okay. It's really fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we gotta get over that, right? Like that's this is it's the Vietnam syndrome. Like Doug has to help Chappie get over the Vietnam syndrome. Like that's what's but the Vietnam, like Doug wants to remind him that the Vietnam syndrome is him watching people get like blown to smithereens, right? Young people that he knew, right? So like there is this, which is interesting, within the film. I think one of the very few things it's actually interesting within the film, um, is this acknowledgement, right, of that you know war is violence, and that people get chewed up and spit out the other end, right, and it's that Doug is in certain ways like uh not ready for what he's about to engage in, but the then it becomes, I mean, but the rest of the movie becomes like a fucking cartoon commercial, like, fucking Micro Machines ad or something like that. I mean, it just becomes, ridiculous in terms of how easy this is, and this kind of cartoonish projection of American power. And it's funny too. I was thinking about, because, Skywalker is also a pilot, right? Like this is so there is this, like there's a lot of like Star Wars Karate Kid in this movie. Um but yeah, I mean this idea is that he's this like prodigy pilot who you put rock and roll on, he gets that American, sonic force pumping through his ears, and he can't fucking miss, right? I mean,
I mean, that
it's
becomes
quite.
the rest of the movie.
Yeah. That's it. We could just shut it down right there.
I
Like
mean,
the
to a degree, I don't think there's not. I think there's a couple of key points to bring in for the
sure. Yeah,
final,
I'm
which is
kidding. But yeah.
literally no, which is. But I want to kind of your point. The final 50 minutes of the movie, because 50 minutes of the movie, and I'm glad Dwayne was in the chat, and if he's still here or if he sees it later. One of the things that I've been thinking about is because this film had to be done largely through um camera gun cams, I mean, on the on planes. And it's me and Dwayne have been having a lot of talks offline about the development of camera technology. And I do know the gun cam and the problems with it in terms of being able to get footage, using film, needing to have an easier transfer method, one that didn't have a lot of breakage or like loss of information, was part of the need to kind of create a new technology to get visual images and moving images, right? And also stills as well. So yeah, it's fascinating. But this movie for like 50 minutes, it's just like a bunch of plain shit, right? And like for a kid, it's really exciting, right? To like watch some shit in the sky for like 50 minutes. And you're just like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, like, they didn't, like, this was new in the 80s. Like,
Yeah.
and honestly, you don't really have it anymore, because nowadays something like this would just be all CGI. Like, it would just be like, if they had a plane, it would be the
Mhm.
plane in a fucking studio with a green screen behind it, right? With like all CGI shit. And in the 80s, they, in this case, they actually, the Israeli Air Force is like happy to have them come over and do this, right? And just, and they're Israeli pilots that are flying around, again, F-16s, that are Israeli F-16s that they've purchased, that they're painted over in American colors and all of this. And then Israeli pilots in the fake MiGs, which are these Kafir, and I did look it up. It's Hebrew for Lions Club, or Lions something, right? So it's like, it's not I mean, I don't know, because Hebrew is a made up language, but um but I don't think it's a play on, Arabic, right? And Islamic discussions around infidel or whatever. But anyway, it's all that, right? So it's like they just put these cameras on these planes and then just go around and shoot a bunch of stuff. And by the way, the all the trick stuff is done by this guy Art Scholl, who's like a very famous Hollywood stunt pilot, who actually dies in Top Gun. And so Top Gun is like, so he dies like 5 months later. He's doing something in Top Gun, and I don't know if it's the goose scene or whatever, but but he dies. Not Goose. Um, he dies, and that film is actually dedicated to him. But this was his last full completed film that he did. Was so all the stunt work that's done in the planes, which is actually pretty incredible in terms of like, if you just in terms of flying, in that he does that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so like so much of the movie from there is you get this, these like flights. So like to kind of like generally kind of go over it. The other thing is like Chappie then like makes a tape, and he gives it to Doug, and they do all the things. They basically, which I look. This is where like it gets unbelievable to me. Also, I mean, it's been unbelievable before. So they're able to get out, smuggle it, no problems. They fly out. They do like their tanker refuel, right? And there's a moment where they also basically break formation, right? And they basically leave what they're supposed to do. And the U.S. just goes, "Hey, you are out of out of alignment," and they just go in and they change the frequency. And there's no problems. And I'm like, oh, is it that easy to do that? Okay, interesting. All right. I'm like, that's interesting. So they just basically break out, and then they go on their right to our, random or, non-named, or it is named Middle Eastern nation that doesn't exist. Right. So they get there, and my big kind of like overall script about this kind of final battle is you realize a couple things. This state, while it has military like force, is pretty dumb. Like simple things like being able to detect um military infiltration through certain kind of heights and levels they haven't figured out. So the Americans know their terrain better than they do, and their blind spots, and they basically haven't done anything to kind of deal with the blind spots that they have. So just pretty dumb, right? Um, that their military leadership is pretty much ran through a kind of insane authoritarianism, right? That basically like they don't really have any kind of pride or reason to be a military. They're just kind of there, and their leader has to constantly invoke them through fear to do shit.
Yeah, I will hang you if you don't do it.
I will hang you. I was like, yes, the hanging, right? They finally got to the real peak Orientalism, the hanging. We needed it. I was waiting for you. Gosh, right? And the other thing is that um all of the things that get bombed are in areas that does not affect civilians, right? Like everything that these fighters are going to do will just be kind of contained within a certain area, and that like this will be a total only military, dropped area, except for when they blow up the oil. We'll get into that in a moment at some point, right? We have to get into that, right? Other than the oil, um, that there is, civilians won't be affected. They'll kind of knock this out. They've planned this out, and they've been very, and you just basically get that they've been very careful in this kind of way. They don't even mention civilians actually
There are no fucking civilians in this
because there are
country.
no
It's
civilian in
just
this country. It's just
yeah,
military, it's just military.
which is part. I mean, that's part of the op, right? Like that is part of the propaganda or psyops of movies like this about this region of the world is that everybody is, you know, like a programmed automaton of the regime. Like, and it's self-contradictory, right? Because on the one end, you're saying, okay, that this leader is literally going to hang anybody who doesn't do what he says, and yet somehow we're still supposed to be against the people who are like in his military or government, right? Like, obviously, if that's the case, then they're totally coerced to be there, and we should be on their side. Like,
They
whatever.
would
It
just
doesn't.
stop, right? If they're getting, yo, we're good. Let's walk out the side. They'll take them out. I'm gonna go home.
Yeah, they could just yeah, it's absurd. It's absurd. So you have that going on. I mean, another thing we didn't really talk about that much, but like, the whole scene when the kids like, you know, get the planes, right? Like they hack into the base and they change stuff and like it's such a funny 80s trope too of this idea that like with one computer you could get an F-16 and fly it to Spain and then, fictional Libya, right? And like nobody along the line is like, "Hey, wait, what happened?" Um
No, not at all. Especially when they break formation and they just go. They're like, hey, we lost 2 planes. Come on. Actually, let's keep it real. If that actually happened, they would think they were defectors. That would be their first worry, that they have defectors, right? Going to either wherever. Pick your country. That's their first worry.
yeah. So anyways, I mean with the scene, what was it? Billiard? Of this fictional country. Yeah, like you say, there's no civilians, there's no civilian infrastructure. You have a desert and like a military um airport essentially, right? And that's pretty much it, right? So
Like
again, it's
early
this
in the movie, you have one shot of a city road,
yeah.
and it's like it's the typical thing, right? You see women in hijabs, right? And then you see military around it, and I feel like every man is military in the movie,
Mhm.
unless they're like, or the only exception are the flight people, the air traffic control,
Mhm.
which is a wing of it essentially, but they're not in
Yeah, they're still
military.
part of it.
But they're not like in military garb. Every man. That's the only shot. You see a palace and it's like unpopulated.
Yeah, it's a lot of unpopulated stuff, right? And that's intentional, right? Because it's like when you're building in, I mean, there's still people, somebody's mentioning this in the chat, right? Who think that like Iran like looks the same, right, as like, rural Iraq or something like that, right? Or it's like like Tehran has 10 million people in it, right? Like we're talking like Like, what are we doing, folks? Like, but that's what these movies do, is that they just kind of like hollow these places out. And there's like the evil dictator, the military, they have Soviet technology, right? Which is important, right? The fact that they have MiGs is the cue in the film that they are, you know, within in the Cold War split of things, these people are on the side of the Soviet Union. So even though it's not discussion really that I can recall within it about communism or anything like that, um, yeah, so that's there. So um, there's that. Well, Mtume is going to be gone quickly. I'm just going to go through the soundtrack real quick. So the soundtrack for this movie, I pulled this up. Where did I put it? Now I can't find it. There it is. So the song that plays a lot is One Vision by Queen. The theme song is Iron Eagle Never Say Die by King Cobra. Um, George Clinton has a song in it, Intense. I don't know Katrina and the Waves. They have a song, Maniac House. Dio, for folks who know Dio, Hide in the Rainbow. That's there. Helix has a song, It's Too Late. Road of the Gypsy, Adrenaline. And then there's stuff that's not included in the soundtrack, right? So we're not going to take it by Twisted Sisters in there. Proud Mary from Ike and Tina Turner. There Was a Time, James Brown, and a couple other things. So, all right. Went through the soundtrack while you were gone,
I
Mtume.
heard it. No, I heard it. None of them. Look, man, that's the other thing about this movie. I was just like, yeah, these songs are things that I did not listen to at all. I'm like, yeah, these songs, yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, yeah, great song that I never heard of. But yeah, it is kind of funny. I also do find it funny that they use Twisted Sister during um the scene of stealing the pretty much setting up the plan to basically get all the military intelligence. That this song of like teen rebellion gets invoked towards like imperialist operation for young American teens on a military base. I mean, it's some clever slick shit, like I'm sure it worked a real number on a lot of people. It did to me.
Yeah. So as you're
Yeah.
saying this too, Left Hand Black Girl, it says, "Yep, they love to claim everywhere they want to invade is an empty desert." I mean, this also is very much the logic of settler colonialism and of Israel, right? A land for a people for or a land for a people without a land, right? Is
Land,
the
yeah.
old slogan of the Zionists. Right, and it's always bullshit, right? There's always people, especially when you get to parts of these lands that you know have resources and so on, right? Which is part of the whole reason for imperialism is to get the resources and the access to these things. So
Yeah.
yeah, and we see that. So he flies in, they fly in. They it starts with the dog fights, right? Isn't that how
Yeah,
it starts?
they kind of
Which
immediately
big
get
80s
into a
thing.
dogfight, right? The dogfight, which also I think is invoking what they would call the Gulf of Sidra incident, right? Because that was a dogfight, and they essentially win the dogfight. And then they also encounter two of them leave in the middle of it, but then there's like a gun on like one of the hills. Pretty much they use the planes to kind of draw the two F-16s to that one. One of them shoots Chappie, right? And he
Yep.
has a kind of like long descend where his plane begins to break down, right? Kills a couple of people. The other thing that I always tell people the thing that I hate the most about military movies or early action movies is the amount of like death that happens per second that's like never accounted for. I told someone, I was like, this is why, like, I just, like the kind of like disintegrating person and what that does psychically. It's funny, like, it's something I wanted to talk to Lara about when we have a conversation eventually within our gates about just this concept of the kind of like how the human can just be like destroyed so quickly and what that does to a person's psychology around and particular people, because of course if when Chappie Because what eventually happens is when Chappie gets his plane shot and he has like a long descent, he kills a bunch of people in the process. But eventually his whole message is you gotta go, keep going. I'm gonna go to the Mediterranean and basically like dispatch there. But you never come, um, you don't know if Chappie's alive or not, right? He might be dead, right? So I feel as to say, you get Chappie, right? You definitely get the invoking of Chappie dying. But what about the two people who just got blown up, right? And it's funny, Paul saying it, wait till I hear it be about video games. Yeah, man. Video games is another. It's something that I've wondered how much that came from action movies, right? The kind of like disintegrating being. No, right on. It's something that's really like plagued me for years. In thinking about this type of stuff. Right. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just think this is why we don't have as many movies like this nowadays, is because Call of Duty does it way more cheaply and effectively, and puts millions of people in the role of, like, I get to do it myself, rather than having to, go to spend a whole bunch of money, millions of dollars to go to a movie theater, to watch some pilots do this kind of stuff. I mean, we did have the Top Gun remake a couple of years ago, and I thought the timing of that uh, was quite interesting. The sequel, I
And
mean,
mega popular. Yeah, and
very
mega
popular,
popular. Super
very
popular.
popular.
Yeah.
But other than that movie, we haven't had a lot of this kind of genre of, the Blue Thunder, Top Gun, Iron Eagle 1 through 4, like, this like, okay, well, let's spend several $1,000,000 to make, some Hollywood F-16 porn for the kids, like,
Yeah. We've now gone back to, I think, like drug lords or futuristic movies about things,
Oh, there's plenty of imperialist film for
Yeah.
sure. A lot.
Yeah. No,
It's
what
like
I'm
all
saying,
of
like
it.
where like the transfer goes. It's like what the interest is. In the 80s, it was, big military planes. Then maybe like these years. I mean, someone I saw someone do a thing on Bad Boys 2, which is funny. I never saw all of it, but about how fucked up it is towards Cubans. And it's like it kind of paints this idea of like Cubans being, which I don't really remember the movie being international drug traders. I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting." But I've seen like only 10 minutes of that movie, I think, honestly, if I'm real. Um,
Yeah,
but
they like
yeah, I mean,
invade Cuba.
Martin Lawrence invades Cuba. This is this yeah, leave that in your brain. And anyone who likes that movie, we gotta talk. We gotta talk. But so yeah, so Chappie gets shot down, and then Doug has to go to the tape, right? And basically Chappie's made a tape for Doug in case, this happens. So Doug won't be alone and he can give him instructions. And this is where the kind of the Iron Eagle moment is invoked, right? That you gotta think about your plane as like an Iron Eagle, and all that type of stuff. And and it's really corny and stupid, and it's honestly not that interesting. But it like becomes like the kind of like God thing. The father becomes like a kind of like God force that he can kind of, I mean, it is Star Wars, right? He's Obi-Wan. He's Obi-Wan. It's Obi-Wan-ness. You're right. It's like he gets to be there. The Force, Luke. Use the Force, right? It's like an Iron Eagle. Be an eagle. It's like it's fucking dumb. Good Lord.
The
Um,
force is the rock music. It's Queen. Listen to
but
Queen, and you
no,
could,
but
the force
literally,
will flow through you.
because he takes out the tape and he always puts on the song, and he's like, he gets it. They have the shot of him in the cockpit, and like the head goes down, and he has like the stick, and you're like, oh man, American rock music destroys random Middle Eastern nation. Yeah. And he does, and Doug is just like Jay said, like the baddest pilot in history. He's just like nasty. Like he's just the baddest dude ever, taking out everything, amazing instincts. This nation is stupid. Like basically, a 17, 18-year-old is smarter than an entire nation of billion or whatever they call this place, right? Smarter. He's just smarter than all of them.
Well, and then there, yeah, and so then the scene too, like, so he goes down, right? He like he's blown up everything, right? Blows up all kinds of shit, just and then yeah, he's like, release my father, right? Or I'm gonna blow up your oil field, and so then they're like, no, we're basically they don't do anything to release his father. He's like, all right, you just lost your oil field, and he flies over and he bombs the fucking oil field. And it's like, I mean, this is to watch this right now in particular, I was just like, holy fuck. Like just some little punk 16-year-old in a movie, but like the to implant that into, you know, a generation of people watching films like this, that like the first thing that you do when, you know, negotiating with, you know, an Arab country that has, you know, is you, if they don't do what you say right away, you bomb their oil field, right? Like just commit a war crime, like just right off the bat, you know. So yeah, anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean it's and he has like this little flippant comment. They're gonna be importing oil now, right? And he makes sure to like say how much oil has been destroyed, right? And the amount of money it's gonna cost him. And it's just like this film is a constant way to kind of get you to kind of root for imperial daggers, right? You because you root for it, like, it gets your blood up for it. Right, and they connect it to his dad because then what happens is they eventually do release his dad, and then the you know our British crazy captain, plane captain, he says, yeah, have the dad come out, right, and but you have a sniper. So the dad basically drives up to the runway. Doug lands the plane after dropping. No, he doesn't drop. Is he? No, I think the napalm comes when he lands. Yeah, no, he does. He drops a napalm like strip right before he lands, right? To basically like keep make a kind of firewall, literal firewall between so he can get his dad. But when they go to get his dad, they shoot his dad in the shoulder, right? And or maybe that makes him drop the bomb. It doesn't really matter. So he goes and he gets his dad, right? Which is also hilarious. His dad goes, Doug. Doug, like, and he's like, "Yeah, Dad, I'm coming to get you," which is like, "Oh, my son has came for me." It's like, "Oh gosh." So they get in the plane. He gets his real dad back, right? And it's funny, like his dad, when they get in the air, doesn't have really good advice. He's just basically like, "Yeah, my son got it. He's a badass. I'm just gonna basically, you know, let's make it happen." And they basically now have to kind of get out the country. And then they basically set it up. Well, I don't know if we mentioned before that, the British actor who's playing the kind of like military leader is also a pilot.
Poirot.
Poirot. He says, I am also a pilot. Like, but the funny thing about those bad actors, they also sound British. I would tell people like even Michael Shirtleff in I can't wait till we do Rambo 2 when he does his Russian Potovsky. It's like you still sound like a Brit, motherfucker. Like I don't buy your Russian accent. You sound like you're British, right? So they're basically got to fight. He says like whoever is the most armed person, let me get their plane, and he follows them. And before all this, he basically, like we said before, he basically
Darth
tells
Vader,
all.
man. Darth Vader's also a pilot.
That's right. I mean, dude, it is Star Wars. Dude, just watch. The screenwriter was just watching Star Wars and just dropping them in, right? And yeah, before all that, the captain is like, I mean, this is the other thing that really, we kind of said the point, but in this scene, you say it heavily. So, like, they have the firewall. So he's like, I want you to go through the firewall, right? Just go through it. And like, they're like, okay. And then they try in like little trucks and then they like fall and like, like they're just, it's Keystone Cops. They make them all Keystone Cops and like, or stormtroopers. Like, they're just dumb, right? Like, it's an idiot nation. They can't defend themselves versus a 17-year-old. coming in. So he has to now go take on Doug, right? And they extend their fight for an extra, like, I don't know, 3 minutes than the normal. But eventually, Doug gets him. It's like, it's whatever. It ain't that hard. It's the most for such a big villain. His death was kind of like, eh, which I think is purposeful.
And
At
so,
least
I
Mr.
mean,
Joshua got a fight in the rain.
yeah.
At least Mr. Joshua got a 1-on-1, and then two, and then a double blast from Murtaugh and Riggs.
No, it's very. I mean, this movie was pretty panned, like, critically. People recognize that this was a bad movie.
But
Oh,
then
yeah,
people like it. But then people liked it. I mean,
yes.
like, to make more than double your budget, and have a big it because there's also that thing about the 80s schlock movie, where
Hmm.
basically the camp, and people
Hmm.
love this kind of camp, right? And then how that also can kind of legitimize us not taking this movie that seriously. Similar to
Right.
Red Dawn, to people who will defend that movie, the kind of 80s camp movie lovers.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter because it ultimately the audience of it is like, younger teens and kids primarily. Like, it's one of those movies where they know that, I mean, it's a military recruitment film. I mean, even though it's funny in some respects that, the Air Force did not endorse it or want a relationship with it because they stole a plane and they also hack because they also hack into the Israeli, or not the Israeli, the Air Force mainframe. All of this stuff they don't want to be associated with a film that is encouraging, and also probably because Lou Gossett Jr., that his character is certainly defying, orders and chain of command and everything else by endorsing this mission, right? So it's encouraging all of these things that go against military protocol, but that's not really the point. The point is to encourage a whole generation of young folks that to be like Doug and to become a fighter pilot and to go, you know, revalorize US imperialism through your heroism, and that's the point. And then, you know, you don't get much else. I mean, the other thing you get is the trial at the very end, which is,
Right.
you know, of course it's not really explained. I don't really fully understand this process because Doug is a civilian. So I don't know, would he be tried in a military court? I'm not sure. I mean,
Mm,
I mean, to me, it's like a felony, like, or something like you stole military equipment. Like you're probably going to be hung for treason, buddy. Like, but anyways, they're both court-martialed, right?
yeah.
They're in a military court, and, they're talking to them about all of the things that they could do to them, lock them up and all of this. And it's interesting too, because Louis Gossett's character, Chappie, for some reason, he's there, but it doesn't seem like he's on trial in the same way, because he actually makes some comment about that they should put uh Doug Masters' character in some place where they can, like, show him discipline and teach him not to, and
Some
make
kind
sure
of
that he,
penal facility.
yeah. So it's funny because Chappie would be the one in the most trouble here. Like, undoubtedly, black man, helps steal military equipment with a
With a
civilian
white kid,
teenager.
with a civilian white teenager. You corrupted white boys, Chappie.
He'd be in so much trouble. But the logic that the movie uses, right, is that the US military would never want this incident to get out. They don't want the public to know that this happens because it exposes their vulnerabilities. And so, especially because it's now successful, they can claim that there was a successful operation that was done by other people. And I think they say Chappie, right, was part of that group that did
but then they deny it. Yes. So like when they get home, they do a thing or where they're getting off the plane and they have like a kind of like news report. So the
Yeah,
first thing the report says is that yeah, Masters is home. He's been rescued. It's a very top secret. We won't tell you how.
right,
Who you see is Chappie Sinclair or Charles Sinclair, and there was rumors that he helped plan the mission, but
right.
on the ground reports that that's unsubstantiated. And the only thing they say about Doug is that he basically flew to help
Yeah,
to meet his dad.
Doug's not in it, but they do create a cover story that includes them, freeing him, but it's confidential, right? It's all top secret. It can't be released, right? Um, which is funny because the real top secret thing about this is that the Israelis almost flew F-16s with U.S. like colors on them into Lebanon, and started an international incident. But the sorry, going back, so in that court martial scene, they're sort of saying, "Oh, all the things that we could do to you, son," basically. And yeah, Chappie convinces them, well, he needs to go to the Air Force Academy basically to learn discipline and to ensure that he never says anything about it, and he can be ordered not to say anything about it because this kid, he's not good at keeping a secret basically. And so anyways, he helps Doug get into the Air Force Academy that he did because of his flunking social studies to fly the simulator, couldn't get into before. And that's how they resolve all of it basically.
It's just military magic. Just and this is why I remember years ago, um, I had like a during like the Patriot Act times, and I remember I had an argument with someone at a bar, and he was trying to convince me why why we do need like top secret things like the government, like there it was like kind of like there's real bad shit that happens in this world, and your government really needs the ability to kind of like do shit, that we don't, need to be knowing. I do think it's net positive. And I remember at being at the bar, I'd be like, "That's fucking nuts, bro! Like that's absolutely fucking nuts." I don't think I really even knew this guy. I think he was like someone a friend of mine was dating, and I was like, and I always get mad at that shit because I'm always kind of like, "Damn, I don't want to ruin her date." But I'm about to put your date on blast. Nah, he's whack. That's whack shit. But yeah, it does kind of, but also makes it fascinating and it makes it cool, right? That that Doug is to be a part of this like thing that'll always be a secret, and it's just dope. And like the Eagles, you get the young black kid in it. You get Styles. You even got a couple of young girls who are part of the crew. A young nerd. I mean, they are like literally diversity. I mean, they are like the best diversity there is, where you got nerds, you got a person of color, you got a couple of young women. I mean, shit, generational, multiple years. This is like diversity, DEI.
And the way that, I mean, it is one of the ways in which this movie, somebody mentioned War Games too, which we'll have to do, which is also all about like hacking into the military, into NORAD, right, and all of
And
this stuff.
AI, right? Isn't it essentially, quote
Mm,
unquote? It's like fake AI, right?
that's interesting. Maybe I
I think
haven't
it is
watched it in a
because
long time.
yeah, because
It's
it
definitely
goes,
like early, like
yeah,
DARPANET, and all of
yeah.
that shit. But that's interesting.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a specifically kind of 80s thing that you don't see a lot anymore, of like civilians like fucking up military technology and this being cool. Like nowadays, the way they would handle it is like Lioness. It would be like Taylor Sheridan. They would do the black op, right? Like it'd be like you can do something that the US government does not officially approve of, but they secretly approve of it, or it's okay because you're the CIA, right? And so even though you don't have the president's approval, like we figured out this basically shadow government, B613 and scandal, all that kind of stuff. Like, um, anyway. So yeah, they don't do this anymore though. I can't think of a movie that's been made in the last like 20 years. It'd be interesting if people in the chat
Well,
can.
because
Maybe there are.
and the military arrangements have changed. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what Alfred and Seckler, a lot of their work has talked about how, because in the 80s, we'll even talk about this when we do To Live and Die in LA, because Friedkin got in some trouble with, I think, the FBI with counterfeit money, and in the movie. So there were these kind of things that I think that were happening, and then I think as the years gone on and the studios wanted better relationships, they were just more willing to basically let the CIA, FBI, and all the other groups just be more heavy-handed, saying you can't do that. And by the point, it becomes fashion probably to tell you what scripts you can and you can't write. Then also as you have more people who were in military ranks who also then become Hollywood screenwriters and TV writers too. You get a massive increase of that starting in the 90s. So they also know. Yeah, I mean, yeah. This was a good exorcism. Get this movie out of my system. I will never see it again. And to answer, I did answer to the chat to Steven's question. They made 4 of these.
Yeah. And Lou Gossett's the
4.
only one who's in all of them.
All of them. Because Doug dies in 2. In like the first
But then he comes
10
back
minutes.
to life in one of them, doesn't he?
Does he? I don't know. I haven't seen past Iron Eagle 2, actually. Iron Eagle 2 was also on a lot when I was a kid. That one. And that is what's fascinating about that story is it's the US and the Soviets linking up to fight another Middle Eastern country. Which I find that's
well, that's Iran.
Yeah. And it's 88.
Like but in the Iran-Iraq war,
yeah.
both the Soviets and the United States, support Iraq,
Yeah.
which is like another thing that people don't, like the lack of history that, like everybody keeps talking about, like this is the first war that America has fought with Iran, and like, well, if you're talking about direct, yeah, but like in terms of proxies, like no way.
Oh my gosh. Quite a few, yeah.
But so Doug Masters dies in the second one, but he returns in the fourth one, played by a different actor.
How?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'll look at my own time. But really, they were. Oh gosh, man. I mean, yeah, this becomes like Lou Gossett's thing, man. Like he's
which
Chappie.
Is so sad. It's so sad. Like, I saw this thing where it was like, because Morgan Freeman apparently was first tried out for this role, and then they gave it to Lou Gossett, and they had to kind of explain that in the time period, Lou Gossett was actually a bigger actor than Morgan Freeman. He was, like, just to give people some idea of like how big he was in this era. Officer and a Gentleman was 83, so this is just a few years later. He's won an Academy Award and all of that. Freeman doesn't start to, like, it's like really glory, and so it's like a late 80s that he really starts to take off. It's not that he has done movies in this period, but he's nowhere near the track record that Louis Gossett Jr. does in this period. But Louis Gossett's career really does start to like go downhill in this period, and this hitching his horse to this wagon of this franchise may have been a part of the dissension for him.
Exactly. But you know what? He got profit in other ways. In 1987, he did a huge campaign with Ronald Reagan and Clint Eastwood about, keeping your cities clean, and he did a big anti-vandalizing campaign. So, and RFK Jr. said that him and Lou were really old friends, because Lou Gossett, was it last year he died? 2 years ago he died, right? And he's also in that really terrible Watchmen series, in a rewrite of Hooded Justice, which I really fucking hated, in multiple ways. But yeah, it's Lou's an interesting one in that regards. But I just think he is like a real indicative symbol of, Black people who just get wedded to Hollywood and get within their brain that a kind of like being part of the Hollywood machine in any way that he can is important. And like, based on some of these political affiliations he did publicly, I'm sure the Iron Eagle project, look, you don't do 4 of those movies if there's not parts of it that you agree with that need to be out there. If he's the face, you know. So it is what it is.
So interestingly, I mean, I just looked this up. He was U.S. Army. He was a ranger in the U.S. Army.
Oh, Gus, it was. I
Um,
missed that.
yeah,
Okay, I
yeah,
missed that. When? So
yeah.
what
Which is
years was
which is
that?
which is part of what gives him like the authenticity, within officer and a gentleman, and then also so it's like kind of
How did I
lending
miss
his credentials. Let's see if it says.
I just totally missed that in his bio. Hmm.
It could be wrong because AI told me that, and it lies all the time. So I'm like,
Yeah, in the bio
you
that
could
I
just,
see, I don't see a mention of that because he
yeah.
was an athlete. One of the biggest stories is that he was offered a trial with the Knicks, but he turned it down to do a Raisin in the Sun on Broadway, which just shows you how like low level basketball was at that time. you know, like that's in like the 50s, late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so it says that so he didn't serve in a war. Um
Mm,
so it was like between he was too young. This is a military website. He was too young to fight
interesting.
in the Korean War and too old to serve in Vietnam. Um Which is interesting because it doesn't I'm not sure. It's interesting because like I'm not totally sure. AI tends to blur like fact and fiction all the time, so I'm
Yeah,
actually not sure. It says in an interview that he talked about it, but I'm not sure that he actually, he could have been
yeah,
talking about one of the movies he did or something.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, he does a
anyway.
lot of. I mean, military stuff becomes like kind of his line. Yeah,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and he has I know I made that comment. I do think his career goes downhill in terms of the quality of stuff that he's in for sure in this period. But I also he has a very long career. He does a lot of stuff in TV and a lot of like
oh
B
yeah.
movies and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, I mean, he's a figure. I mean, that's what I tell people also. Like, he's a figure. Like Lou Gossett, and there's that other thing that he did where he played in the was it the early 80s where he played Sadat. That's the other big thing. In a TV
I did,
movie.
oh man, we might have to
I've
do that.
never I've never seen it. I've never seen it, and I'm actually down to watch it. I've never seen it though, and I've read about the controversies, but I also don't know. Like I've read about them, but I don't know who I'm getting them from. The sources. I'm sure there were controversies, but like they try to make like the racial part of it, and I'm like, okay, I need to read who said what. But yeah, there's a lot of controversies about it, but the narrative around it, yeah.
Just a second. I have to show this to people.
Do it. Do it.
Hang on. I downloaded a bunch of shit. I
It's a
probably
mini
just
series,
downloaded
not a
like
movie.
I know. I probably just downloaded like an Israeli virus onto my computer. Sorry. Hang on.
Yeah, we're all said that.
This this is a bad screen grab. I'm doing this really quick, but people just have to see this image.
It's deep. I know what you're about to show. I've seen it.
It's taking this is the I'm sorry for the added suspense, people. All right. This is the cover. uh, the pyramids and tanks on fire. That's just wild. Holy cow. I think we have to do that at some point. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I've never seen it, and it was like a lot of stuff. And then he like it's like a lot of shit, and it became a thing. But that's like a thing. I mean, it becomes the kind of you know the ground for these actors. You know, and we should also we probably. I mean, we're gonna do Officer and a Gentleman also, and maybe do Enemy Mine. The movie always weirded me out, but.
I don't know that one.
That's the one where he plays an alien with Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid's like the human.
Sold. Like that's all you had to say. Alien with Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, we have to do it
Oh
though.
man.
Yeah.
All right, let me look. There's a few things in the chat.
Let's
I
see.
starred. Shout out to the chat. They've been on fire all day. This is why we have to be anti-imperialist and not just environmentalist, thinking about
Yeah.
the oil rain coming down in Iran. You want
Oh
to see
man.
Orientalism, watch the Sinbad movies for sure.
And
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, as a kid, I did, and so bad. Was the
They
seventh
were in
voyages or something like that?
they
Sinbad or
would
something like that.
incorporate it into the Muppet Babies when we were kids. Like I really
I don't remember this.
this yeah, so like I mean somebody in the chat will co-sign me, but yeah, in the Muppet Babies they would have like little clips of Sinbad in it and then like the Muppets would like move through them and shit and it's
Oh
just bizarre.
wow.
It's very interesting because Disney Plus for some reason does not have the old Muppet Babies. They have some new version that's very different. Um, and I find that fascinating. Like I'm always interested in the stuff that they cut out of their catalog because there's so much fucked up shit within the Disney catalog
Mm-hmm.
and so much fit they still show, but like, they don't have Song of the South. Like they're just certain things that are like, we don't want to show that. And I have a feeling that they were doing some really crazy psyops to us through Muppet Babies when we were growing up. So anyway, the bullies were pretty good. I mean, elementary bullies were very much in that vein. Yeah, I had some bullies, but they weren't
I had
this
bullies
quality.
too. I had
They weren't
bullies
this
too.
caliber.
No.
Based on the way a lot of Gen Xers talk, I would say they clearly have some trauma that they are not dealing with. So maybe, yeah. This was a good comment. I think the bullying is elite social reproduction. Look at the practice. I'm not going to say the word.
Mm-hmm.
In elite British boarding schools, bullying is a way of enforcing hierarchy, and that was basically like younger students having to like do all of this like maid type labor for older, and then involved with like both sexual and physical abuse as well. It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome. I'm glad we could destroy our brain cells for you.
Yeah.
We do it so that you don't have to. And the USA is a punk 16-year-old. That's very accurate, unfortunately. All right. Sorry, I'm looking at people's Muppet Babies comments. Nobody can. No.
I watched it. It's been so long. I just don't remember.
Yeah,
It's
I
been a
don't know.
really long time.
I have to look. I'm curious on that. We need to. I'm realizing as we do this that we're gonna have to get Alex Avina on soon to do some GI Joe episodes because
Oh yeah.
we have to go there.
That or the movie or both.
Yeah, could do the movie.
Yeah. It's been a long time
But
since I've seen the movie also.
it's GI Joe was wild. All right.
All right. We got to figure out our next week.
Yeah, we have some
Yeah.
ideas in the percolator.
We
I've
do.
got a guest for Rambo 3, so maybe we'll do Rambo 2 next week, and then
Yeah. I actually can't wait to do Rambo 2. I'm sorry. Like, you want to talk about an absurd final, like, 10 I'm sorry. Like, Rambo 3, too. Like, the ending is, like, really hilarious. But I mean, I don't know. I saw a clip. A clip of it was shared on IG like about a month ago of him, like doing the fucking like hit the Rambo gun to like into the machine. Oh, it's just like, oh man, dude. Oh man, yeah. It's just woo. It's just heavy. Yeah, we might have to do the Rambo. Is Rambo 2 the one where he fights the US? No, it's where he goes back to Vietnam. and they have a Russian, a Soviet kind of commander who basically runs all their shit, played by British Michael Shurtleff, who kind of looks like a German Nazi in the film. So it's,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the numbers with Rambo get all confusing, but because sometimes it's referred to as like the second. This is
First Blood
actually
Part 2.
First Blood 2, Rambo, but then when they go to the third one, they call it Rambo 3, even though there's no Rambo 2. So like it all gets kind of thrown out of whack. But
It's so stupid.
but yeah, so the next one is that one. They go back to Vietnam, and then the one after that is the one in Afghanistan where they are fighting Soviets. It's the dedicated to the brave fighters of the Mujahideen. That's all right.
Yeah. All right, y'all.
All right, peace, everybody. Thank you.
Peace.